Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Desperately, Lubbock tried to retract the wires, but the powerful force pulling him left him no room to maneuver. Time was slipping away, and he knew he wouldn't be able to escape. Just as he was about to be split in half by Esdeath's blade, a blue figure suddenly flashed into view, positioning itself between Lubbock and Esdeath. A blue saber carved a graceful arc through the air, slicing through the cross-tail wires effortlessly. The figure then spun around, delivering a powerful kick aimed directly at Esdeath's face. Faced with the oncoming kick, Esdeath hurriedly raised her saber to block. Clang! A crisp clash echoed through the air, and Esdeath was forced back several dozen meters. The white boots on her feet left 2 deep furrows in the ground as she skidded backward. I see. So this is your Imperial arms? Esdeath said, lowering her saber as she eyed the blue figure now standing protectively in front of Lubbock. A smile curved at the corners of her mouth. Wood now looked entirely different. He was clad in a full suit of armor, completely ice blue in color. The armor covered his entire body, and blue pulses of energy flickered like a heartbeat at his shoulders, abdomen, and knees. In his hand was an equally ice blue long saber, transparent like crystal. This was the blade Wood had used to easily sever Lubbock's cross-tail wires. Demon God Descends, Winter Night, this was the name of Wood's Imperial arms. In its normal form, this Imperial arms appeared to be an ordinary long blade, but when activated, it transformed into full-body armor. The materials used to forge the Winter Night were 1,000-year-old refined iron buried under the ice, combined with the bones of Skaza, the super dangerous dragon-like beast that had lived in those frozen lands. When using this Imperial arms, Wood's overall abilities were drastically enhanced. He also gained resistance to extreme cold and the power to manipulate ice on a smaller scale. A main character should wield armor, and Wood was no exception. Even if it was a bit flashy, the power boost was undeniable. Earlier, when Wood fought Esdeath, he hadn't had the upper hand in terms of raw strength. But now, equipped with his Imperial arms, he had managed to kick her back dozens of meters. You and General Najunda should leave. I'll hold her off, Wood said to Lubbock, turning his attention back to Esdeath, who now wore a look of excitement. He knew she was about to get serious, and he needed Lubbock and Najunda out of harm's way. Are you crazy? That woman is a monster. If you stay here alone, you'll die, Lubbock protested. Just from what he had seen earlier, he understood the vast gap in strength between them and Esdeath. Without mincing words, if Wood hadn't saved him earlier, Lubbock would have been split in half by now. Because of this, Lubbock didn't believe Wood could defeat Esdeath. Leaving him here alone would mean certain death. If anyone had to stay behind to buy time, Lubbock thought, it should be him. Wood could have stayed in the Empire, but because of Lubbock's selfishness, he'd been dragged into betraying the Empire and joining the Revolutionary Army. Enough nonsense. I would have let you stay behind, sure. That way, you could boost your approval rating with your goddess, and I wouldn't mind taking credit as a martyr. Wood's voice remained calm. But can you actually hold her off? Hurry up and take your goddess away. You staying here would just be a distraction to me. My Imperial arms is the perfect counter to hers. Without you two around, I won't have any trouble escaping. After hearing Wood's analysis, Lubbock reluctantly nodded and agreed. He and Najunda turned and fled. Seeing Najunda and Lubbock's intention to escape, Esdeath naturally wanted to chase after them. But just as she moved, a blue figure appeared in front of her, bringing a saber down in a sweeping arc. Clang! The sound of blades clashing echoed through the air, and the resulting shockwave kicked up a cloud of dust. The force of their clash left the ground beneath their feet shattered like a broken mosaic. General Esdeath, your opponent is me. You can't afford to be distracted until you've defeated me. With the Winter Night armor equipped, Wood's previous physical disadvantages had vanished. This time, when their blades met, Wood wasn't sent flying. Instead, they were evenly matched. After their blades parted, Esdeath looked in the direction where Najunda and Lubbock were fleeing. Deciding to give up on the chase, she turned her full focus to the fight before her. With a single-handed swipe, She summoned countless icicles that rapidly formed in the air before shooting straight at Wood. The number of icicles was overwhelming, and even with Wood's swordsmanship, it was impossible to block them all. Yet the few that hit his armor shattered on impact, causing no harm whatsoever. Our Imperial arms are quite incompatible, aren't they? The ice dragon Skaza was a dragon-type danger beast that lived in extreme cold. To it, ice was little more than decoration. Chapter 400, New members. Wood's Imperial arms was crafted from the materials of dragon-type danger beasts that lived in the extreme cold regions, along with thousand-year-old refined cold iron. Its defensive power against physical attacks was noteworthy, but Wood took particular pride in its ability to withstand extreme cold. Crafted from a dragon-shaped danger beast that lived in the freezing lands. So what? I grew up in the northern borders, where it was always snow and ice. The danger beasts there might be accustomed to the cold, but being resistant to it doesn't mean they can't be frozen to death. If the temperature drops enough, any living being will meet its end. As Esdeath spoke, she swung her arm again, and massive pillars of ice began to burst from the ground. Snowflakes started to drift slowly down from the sky. This was all my fault. Ultimately, it was my own oversight. I didn't consider that the army still had manned flying danger beasts, nor did I expect Esdeath would pursue us personally. I also didn't realize her strength was this overwhelming. I shouldn't have agreed to bring you along earlier, and wouldn't have had to. That night, after fleeing for an entire day, Najunda and Lubbock finally made it out of the southwestern border, though it cost them the exhaustion of their horses. As soon as they stopped to rest, Najunda couldn't hide her guilt and expressed her regret. To her, if it weren't for Wood staying behind to cover the retreat, they never would have escaped from Esdeath. During this escape, Wood had saved her life not once but twice. If anyone is responsible for what happened to him, it should be me. I'm the one who convinced him to join the Empire as a soldier, and I'm the one who led him to defect with me. But I trust Wood. He's not someone who would die easily. He promised me, and Wood's never broken a promise, not once in all the time I've known him. If he is truly dead this time, then I... Before Lubbock could finish his words, a dark figure suddenly appeared behind him and continued. Shut up, already. Stop raising those weird death flags. I can't take all these dramatic gestures from you guys. Hearing the familiar voice and turning around to see the familiar figure, Lubbock's face immediately lit up with joy. He opened his mouth to say something, only to see his close friend, exhausted, collapse to the ground. Wood. Lubbock's initial excitement froze into concern as he saw Wood collapse. Panic set in almost immediately. Relax. He's not badly hurt, just suffering from mild frostbite and extreme fatigue. Let's get him some hot water and let him rest for a day, and he should be fine. Seeing Wood collapse, Najunda was also very worried, but her experience and age allowed her to stay calm longer than Lubbock. She quickly assessed Wood's condition and determined that he would be alright with some rest. When Wood awoke again, it was the morning of the third day. He had been in a state of deep sleep the whole time, and Lubbock had been carrying him throughout. Although Najunda offered to take turns carrying Wood with Lubbock, the green-haired youth stubbornly refused. Lubbock insisted that Wood's injuries were his fault, so carrying him was a burden he needed to bear. However, Wood knew Lubbock well enough to know that his supposed guilt, while present, was far from overwhelming. The real reason Lubbock refused Najunda's offer was that he didn't want Wood to get too comfortable being carried by his goddess. Is there anything to eat? I'm starving. The first thing Wood did when he woke up was ask for food. It made sense. After using his Imperial arms to battle Esdeath, chasing Najunda and Lubbock through the night, and then sleeping for 2 days straight, his body was completely empty. Wanting something to eat was more than reasonable. Wood, you're finally awake. We owe you our lives. If it weren't for you, we would have all been killed by Esdeath. Najunda said with obvious relief upon seeing Wood awake and unharmed. Akam, share some of your meat with Wood. He's one of us now. One of our most trusted comrades. Najunda said as she turned to a black-haired girl walking at the front of their group. It was then that Wood noticed, at some point during his unconsciousness, their group had gained a new member. The newcomer was a beautiful young girl who appeared to be around 17 or 18 years old, wearing a black sailor uniform and carrying a long sword at her waist. Wood immediately sensed that she was also an Imperial arms user, and her weapon was the long sword at her side. What puzzled Wood, however, was that despite her slender build and perfect proportions, this girl named Akam was holding what appeared to be a mass of meat almost as heavy as herself. She was devouring it enthusiastically while walking. Hearing Najunda's request, the black-haired girl glanced at Wood with an appraising look before, reluctantly, breaking off a large piece of meat and handing it to him. If you're a comrade, then I'll share some with you. Eating meat will help you recover quickly, she said. Meat as a cure-all for recovery? If it weren't for Akam's clearly feminine appearance, Wood might have suspected she was somehow related to that rubber kid who could stretch and change size. Her astonishing appetite and her beliefs about eating meat reminded him of an alternate world version of that boy. Wood, if you're awake, could you walk on your own? I've been carrying you for 2 days now, and it's killing me. Lubbock complained. Though an Imperial Arms user himself, Lubbock wasn't a strength-type fighter. Carrying Wood for 2 days had drained him significantly. However, Wood wasn't going to let Najunda carry him, and as for Akam, she was new, and Lubbock wasn't quite ready to trust her fully. Besides, she had her hands full with all that meat. Weren't you the one who said this was a burden you had to bear? Come on, this is nothing. My body's still weak, and I'm not up for walking long distances yet. So you'll have to keep at it, my green-haired angel. Wood teased, using his oily hands to wipe grease on Lubbock's clothes as he chewed on a large hunk of meat. Wood's smug grin made Lubbock's earlier feelings of guilt completely disappear. Still, with Najunda nearby, Lubbock had no choice but to endure and continue serving as Wood's pack mule. Wood, how did you escape from Asdeath? Did you manage to defeat her? Najunda asked. She found the latter part of her question hard to believe, but she couldn't imagine a scenario where Asdeath would willingly spare someone. Maybe Wood really had beaten her. In the end, I lost the fight. I managed to withdraw while conserving some of my strength, though. Asdeath also sustained some injuries, but she definitely had the ability to keep pursuing me. However, she chose to let me go. Wood explained. Indeed, Wood had ultimately lost to Asdeath in their confrontation. Without access to magic due to the world's lack of magical energy, Wood's abilities were significantly weakened. When it came to pure physical ability, Asdeath outmatched him. Wood's only edge was his superior swordsmanship, but in terms of battle experience and technique, Asdeath was just as skilled as he was. Asdeath's Imperial Arms was also extremely powerful, enhanced by drinking all of the demon's extract, which made her Imperial Arms far stronger than others. Even though Wood's Winter Knight armor countered her powers, it wasn't enough to give him a real advantage. Had it not been for the onset of nightfall, triggering his blessing of the radiant moon, and the fact that he was fighting to protect Lubbock and Najunda, which met the activation conditions of Night's honor, he wouldn't have escaped with just exhaustion. Without those blessings, Wood would likely have been far worse off, possibly missing some body parts. While Asdeath was incredibly powerful, Wood felt she wasn't unbeatable. With the use of his Imperial Arms and his divine heart, he thought he might stand a good chance of defeating her. Of course, that assumed Asdeath hadn't held anything back, such as a secret technique within her Imperial Arms. Don't be discouraged. You managed to retreat from Asdeath and even injure her. That's impressive. With your current strength, you're easily among the top 3 in the entire Empire. And you're still young. There's no reason to think you can't surpass her one day. Najunda encouraged. Najunda wasn't just offering empty words of comfort. She genuinely believed what she said. She had thought someone as monstrous as Asdeath was an anomaly, but now there was Wood, someone just as extraordinary. Najunda then told Wood what had happened while he was unconscious. When Najunda defected, the Empire naturally sent assassins after her. Najunda was a former general, well-versed in the Empire's military strategies and defenses, and her joining the Revolutionary Army would make her a formidable threat. To prevent this, the Empire sent their best to eliminate her. One of these assassins was none other than Akam, a member of the Empire's Elite 7 assassination unit and one of the most feared assassins in the Empire. Her Imperial Arms, one-cut killer, Morass aim, could instantly kill anyone it cut by poisoning them with a lethal curse. Despite her fearsome reputation, Akam ended up switching sides and joining Najunda, thanks to her realization of the Empire's corruption. With her former comrade's tragic fate in mind, she listened to Najunda's words and decided to join the Revolutionary Army. With Asdeath failing to stop them and Akam, one of the Empire's top assassins, defecting, the Empire had no choice but to abandon their pursuit of Najunda's group. Upon arriving at the Revolutionary Army, Najunda was given the task of infiltrating the capital. Najunda, being intimately familiar with the Empire, along with a group of elite Imperial Arms users like Wood, was tasked with setting up operations within the capital. The Revolutionary Army needed informants in the capital to keep them updated on the Empire's movements, but they also needed to assassinate corrupt officials to sow chaos. Thus, Night Raid, an assassination unit, was formed. It began with just Najunda, Wood, Lubbock, and Akam, but soon grew to include more members. Mine, a petite, pink-haired sundeer, joined the group. She had a natural talent for marksmanship, making her the ideal candidate to inherit Najunda's romantic turret, Pumpkin. Leone, a bold and carefree woman, also joined. She grew up in the slums and used her Imperial Arms, acquired on the black market, to bring justice to corrupt nobles. Sheil, a soft-spoken girl with glasses, discovered her talent for killing after defending her best friend, leading her to join Night Raid. Bullet, a muscular warrior with a strong sense of justice, defected from the Empire's army after witnessing corruption firsthand and became one of Night Raid's most reliable members. Night Raid, composed of former Empire soldiers, assassins, and those who sought justice, was now ready to face the challenges that awaited them in the capital. Chapter 401, The village boy arrives in the capital. Tatsumi, a young boy from a rural border village, came to the capital hoping to bring prosperity back to his impoverished village. Alongside his friends, Seo and Ayasu, Tatsumi planned to achieve success and eventually return home as a hero. However, on the way to the capital, the trio was attacked by bandits, separating Tatsumi from his friends. By the time he arrived at the bustling capital, he found himself alone, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer scale and unfamiliarity of it all. Luckily for Tatsumi, his first encounter in the capital turned out to be a fortunate one. He soon crossed paths with two seemingly friendly people on the busy streets. One was a voluptuous woman with blonde hair named Leon, and the other was a black-haired young man around his age named Wood. Tatsumi, are you sure you don't want some? The Empire might have its fair share of terrible things, but the one thing they do right is their alcohol. Wood said, grinning. Yeah, seriously. You won't get this kind of drink back in the countryside. It'd be a shame not to try it at least once. Leon added, nodding enthusiastically. Looking at Leon and Wood, who were clearly in a festive mood, Tatsumi politely refused. It wasn't that he didn't appreciate their offer. He simply wasn't used to drinking alcohol. Tatsumi had never touched the stuff. In his village, where resources were scarce, they could hardly afford to waste grain on brewing. Mr. Wood, Miss Leon, let's skip the drinks. You said you know people in the military. Can you really introduce me to someone who can help me join the Empire's army? Tatsumi asked, his tone hopeful. Tatsumi had already spent a decent amount of money buying drinks for these two strangers, but if it meant getting a chance to join the Imperial Army, he considered it more than worth the price. He couldn't believe his luck. He had barely arrived in the capital and already encountered such helpful people. Who knows? Maybe by the time Seo and Ayasu arrived, he'd have already secured a good position, making them look at him with awe. The village elder had been right, the world outside could be dangerous, but there were still plenty of good people out there. Don't worry about it. Wood reassured him with a grin. I used to be in the Imperial Army myself. I was a bodyguard for one of the generals. I quit because the military's regulations were just too strict for me. But with your skills, getting you in as a squad leader will be a piece of cake. Tatsumi couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. Wood spoke so convincingly, and everything he said about the army sounded completely legitimate. Really? Starting as a squad leader? That's amazing, thank you so much, Mr. Wood. Hearing Wood's words, Tatsumi's eyes lit up. He could already imagine himself as a squad leader, with Seo and Ayasu looking up to him and calling him commander. Of course. You've already proven you can handle mid-level danger beasts by yourself, so becoming a squad leader is well within reach. That said, you know how it is. I've been out of the military for a while now, and though I still have some connections, asking people for favors without giving anything in return is... You know. Wood trailed off, rubbing his thumb and forefinger together in a gesture that clearly implied he needed something more from Tatsumi. Tatsumi quickly got the hint. He reached into his pockets and pulled out all the coins he'd earned from hunting danger beasts along the way, piling them in front of Wood and Leon. Tatsumi might have been naive, but he wasn't stupid. He understood that if you wanted help, you had to offer something in return. This is more than I expected. Wood said, weighing the coin pouch in his hand, smiling broadly along with Leon. With this, you might even end up with something better than just a squad leader position. We'll take care of everything. Wood and Leon assured Tatsumi that they'd handle things from there, then took the money and left the tavern, leaving the young man with dreams of his future in the Empire's military. That kid seemed like a good-hearted boy. I almost feel guilty tricking a country bumpkin like him. Leon admitted as they walked out of the tavern, looking a bit regretful. We're doing him a favor. Wood replied, shrugging. The capital's a nasty place. If he's going to live here, he needs to learn not to trust strangers so easily. Besides, the kid's strong. He'll be able to take care of himself. Consider this an expensive lesson. If you're really feeling guilty, you could always give up your share of the money. I'll be more than happy to bear your burden. Leon's fleeting remorse vanished as quickly as it came. Wood was right. They'd taught the kid an important lesson. Even if it had cost him a fair bit of money. With newfound enthusiasm, Leon decided there was no need to feel guilty. The two were planning to hit up another bar when, as they passed an alley, they spotted a mark scrawled on the wall. A sign left by Night Raid. It meant they had a mission. The thought of more drinks would have to wait. Night Raid's hideout was located in the mountains, 10 kilometers north of the capital. Their main activities involve taking on requests from the capital's residents to eliminate corrupt officials and criminals, all in the name of justice. Ultimately, their goal was to assassinate the Empire's true source of corruption. Prime Minister Honest. Night Raid's name was derived from their covert nature. All member identities were confidential, and their expertise lay in nighttime assassinations. When Leon and Wood arrived at the hideout, it seemed everyone else had been waiting for them. Unlike Leon and Wood, the rest of Night Raid's members rarely ventured out into the capital during the day. You two were out drinking again, weren't you? You're supposed to be gathering intelligence, not getting drunk. Boss, say something to them. At this rate, they'll both end up as hopeless alcoholics. Mine, the pink-haired sundeer, huffed as she pinched her nose at the overpowering smell of alcohol. Wood, I've told you before. Unless it's necessary, you should avoid moving around the capital. Leon can handle the intelligence gathering. You, Bullet, and Akam are all on the Empire's wanted list. If someone recognizes you, it'll be a huge problem. Najunda said calmly. Najunda didn't reprimand them too harshly. She herself enjoyed drinking, after all. And she knew Leon frequented bars not just for the alcohol but because they were prime spots for gathering information. Bars were where all types of people came together. The perfect setting for picking up useful intelligence. Seeing that Najunda wasn't going to punish them, Mine crossed her arms, clearly still upset. Wood quickly stepped forward, offering her a beautifully wrapped piece of cake. This is the most popular cake in the capital right now. I bought it just for you. Wood said with a smile. Besides, boss called us all back here for a mission. Let's save the scolding for later, all right? Mine huffed, snatching the cake from his hand. True to form, she backed off, seemingly mollified by the treat. Boss, what's the mission this time? It must be something serious if you're calling all of Night Raid together. Leon asked, curious. It was rare for them all to be summoned. Ever since Night Raid had formed, full-team missions were few and far between. Only reserved for the most dangerous of targets. Typically, they worked in pairs. Yeah, boss. If Wood, Akam, and Bullet are all involved, the target must be pretty tough, right? Mine added. The Night Raid members knew each other's personalities and strengths well. While Najunda was their leader, she wasn't the strongest. In terms of sheer combat ability, the top three in Night Raid were Wood, Akam, and Bullet. Najunda took a drag from her cigarette, then casually tossed a folder onto the table. You've got it wrong. I'm calling everyone together not because the enemy is too powerful but because there are a lot of targets this time. If only two of you go, there's a chance some might escape, and we can't risk the intel leaking. All of you are going. Take a look. This is your mission for tonight. Ah, it's that family. Leon muttered, flipping through the documents. I've heard of them. Terrible people. The daughter, especially. She's the worst of them all. This is perfect? The target was a wealthy merchant family. On the surface, they were respectable, but behind closed doors, they were monsters. They enjoyed luring beggars and travelers to their home, pretending to offer charity, only to subject them to horrific torture and eventually kill them for their own twisted amusement. The mission was to eliminate every member of the household. Not just the ringleaders but also the guards who enabled their atrocities. As night fell, Tatsumi, who had been given lodging in the mansion, heard strange noises echoing through the halls. Sword in hand, he stepped out of his room to investigate. As he moved through the darkened corridors, he stumbled upon a sight he would never forget. A beautiful, black-haired girl wearing a black sailor uniform stood under the moonlight, wielding a long sword as she slaughtered the people in the mansion. The girl was Akam, one of Night Raid's assassins. Among those fleeing for their lives was Arya, the young daughter of the family. The same girl who had taken Tatsumi in. To Tatsumi, Arya had been like an angel, his benefactor. Seeing her in danger, with Akam closing in like a relentless reaper, Tatsumi's sense of justice flared up. He couldn't just stand by and do nothing. He threw himself between Akam and Arya, blocking Akam's deadly strike with his sword. You're not on my list of targets. But if you get in my way, I'll kill you too. Akam said coldly. She had studied her targets beforehand, and Tatsumi wasn't one of them. However, if Tatsumi chose to stand in her way, she'd show no mercy. After all, if he was protecting monsters like Arya, then perhaps he was just as bad. Tatsumi, though determined, was no match for Akam's skill. After only a few clashes, he found himself disarmed and on the ground. As Akam raised her blade to strike him down, Tatsumi closed his eyes, accepting his fate. He didn't expect his journey in the capital to end so quickly. However, just as Akam's blade was about to fall, another sword intercepted it with a loud clang. Tatsumi opened his eyes, confused. Kid, never close your eyes in the middle of a fight. It means you've accepted death. As long as you're alive, there's always a chance to turn things around, said a familiar voice. Tatsumi looked up and couldn't believe his eyes. Standing before him was Wood, who had stopped Akom's blade. Akom, too, seemed surprised. More than that, she looked puzzled. Akom, this kid isn't like the others. He's probably just another victim of their lies. Leon and I know him. Wood explained. Go after the real target. I'll take care of him. Chapter 402, Wood's passionate words. Hearing Wood's words, Akom hesitated only for a brief moment before glancing at Tatsumi. Without questioning further, she dashed past them to continue her pursuit of Arya, their primary target. To Akom, Wood was a trusted comrade, and whatever he said was enough for her to follow without argument. Seeing Akom heading off to kill Arya, Tatsumi tried to stand and chase after them, but Wood quickly placed a firm hand on his shoulder, holding him back. Kid, I just saved your life from Akom's blade, and you don't even say thanks? Instead, you want to go throw yourself into danger again? I get that you're strong, but you're no match for Akom. If she takes you seriously, you'll be dead before you know it. Wood said, his tone filled with a mix of humor and genuine concern. Wood couldn't help but feel a hint of appreciation for Tatsumi's determination. There was something genuine about the way the boy rushed to save someone he believed in, despite everything. It was exactly this quality that made Wood unwilling to let Tatsumi blindly charge off and get himself killed. Even if it means my death, I can't just stand by. Arya and her family were kind to me. Why are you doing this? Why kill and destroy them? You're just like demons. Tatsumi shouted, his frustration boiling over. The events since arriving in the capital had shattered all his previous ideas of how the world worked. Demons, huh? So, you see us as villains? Wood mused, his eyes narrowing slightly. Tatsumi didn't deny it. After all, Akom and Wood were obviously working together. The massacre he witnessed, Akom's cold expressions as she cut down their enemies, the way Wood tricked him out of his money. Everything pointed to them being villains. On the other hand, Arya's family had shown him kindness, taking him in when he had nowhere else to go. To Tatsumi, it was clear who was right and who was wrong. Kid, what you see isn't always the truth. Those who seem righteous might be hiding something much darker beneath the surface, and those who seem evil might not be what they appear. Remember, I swindled you out of your money the moment you arrived in the capital. How quickly you trusted me then. Wood said, his tone almost teasing. Tatsumi wanted to retort, but before he could respond, a tall, voluptuous figure suddenly dropped down beside them. With little effort, she grabbed Tatsumi by the collar, lifting him off the ground. Wood, you're wasting too much time explaining. Why not just show him what true darkness looks like? Said Leon, now transformed by her imperial arm. Lionel. She had shifted from a blonde beauty to a wild beast-like form. An imposing woman with golden ears and a powerful lion-like tail. Lionel was a bell-type imperial arm that gave Leon beast-like features, dramatically enhancing her physical capabilities, her senses, and even her regenerative abilities. In this state, she could easily carry Tatsumi while dashing at full speed. Despite Tatsumi's initial struggle, Leon's arm squeezed him tightly, leaving him no choice but to stop resisting. It wasn't that he wanted to give up, but being wedged between Leon's ample chest made it difficult for him to even breathe. Much less struggle. When Wood and Leon arrived in the mansion's backyard, they found Akom standing over the bodies of Arya's slain guards, her sword dripping with blood. Arya, with nowhere left to run, looked desperate, her eyes filled with terror. Seeing Leon appear with Tatsumi, Arya suddenly found a last glimmer of hope. Tears welled in her eyes, and she pleaded. Tatsumi, save me. I don't want to die. Hearing Arya's cry for help, Tatsumi, driven by a sense of justice, broke free from Leon's grip, rushing to her side. He stood in front of Arya, shielding her from Akom. Akom's brow furrowed as she looked at Tatsumi, visibly annoyed by his interference. She opened her mouth, likely to order him to move, but Wood spoke first. Tatsumi, you seem convinced that we're villains, that we kill for no reason. Look behind you at that door. Wood said, pointing to a large wooden door at the back of the mansion. Open it, and you'll understand everything. But I warn you. What lies behind that door is the true darkness of the Empire. If you're not prepared, it might be better not to look. Tatsumi hesitated but turned to look at the door. It seemed to lead to a large storeroom. Despite his skepticism, Tatsumi thought Wood had no reason to lie. If Wood had intended to kill him, he could have done so already. There was no need for elaborate tricks. Tatsumi, don't listen to them. They're nothing but ruthless killers. Please, just protect me. Arya cried, her voice filled with panic as she grabbed at Tatsumi's arm, trying to stop him from moving towards the door. Wood moved in a flash, slapping Arya's hand away and sending her sprawling to the ground. Ruthless killers. Compared to what you've done, we're as harmless as lambs. With a creak, Tatsumi pushed open the door, and immediately a wave of putrid stench hit him. Inside, he saw what could only be described as a living nightmare. The large storeroom was not a storage space at all. It was a gruesome slaughterhouse, filled with rotting bodies in various states of decay. Some had just recently died, while others had clearly been hanging for a long time, turned into mummified husks. Tatsumi's stomach churned, and he felt bile rising in his throat. But the worst was yet to come. Among the dead, Tatsumi recognized two familiar faces. Sayo and Ayasu, his childhood friends. Sayo had been skinned, her body mutilated beyond recognition. Ayasu, barely clinging to life, managed to whisper the truth about Arya's family and their sadistic crimes before succumbing to his injuries. As Ayasu breathed his last, Tatsumi could no longer deny the truth. The family he had seen as his benefactors were monsters, their kindness nothing but a mask to hide their vile nature. Seeing her crimes exposed, Arya's demeanor shifted. No longer pleading, she sneered at Tatsumi, her voice dripping with malice. "We are the elite of the Empire. People like you, filthy commoners, exist to entertain us. That girl, Sayo, thought she could look better than me? She deserved what happened to her." Before she could say anything more, Tatsumi's blade was already moving. In one swift motion, her head flew from her shoulders, her life ending in an instant. Tatsumi didn't feel any remorse. He only felt a cold satisfaction, as if he had put down a beast. Arya may have looked like a human, but her actions had proven otherwise. With Arya dead, Night Raid's mission was complete. All members of the corrupt family, including their guards, had been eliminated. Some had tried to escape, but mine, positioned at a distance, took care of them with well-placed shots. With their mission finished, the members of Night Raid gathered in the mansion's backyard, discussing what to do with Tatsumi. Lubbock and Akam argued that Tatsumi had seen their faces and couldn't be trusted. Either they had to kill him or find a way to detain him. Mine and Shiel remained neutral, while Bullet and Leon supported Tatsumi, saying he seemed like a decent person. With Night Raid split on the matter, the decision fell to Wood, who stood between the two sides. Wood looked down at the defeated Tatsumi, who knelt on the ground, too exhausted to fight or even react. His friends were dead, and his entire worldview had shattered. "Hey, kid," Wood said, surprising everyone. "How about joining us?" "Wait, what? Are you serious?" Mine protested. The pink-haired sniper was indignant. "This guy got tricked twice in a single day. He's weak. He's clueless. He'll just drag us down." Wood shrugged off her complaints. "Why not? I see potential in this kid. Sure, he might not be that strong yet, but I think he has the guts to grow. One day, he might even surpass us all. Besides, I took his money. I might not be able to get him into the Empire's military, but I could at least recommend him to join us." Leon laughed, giving Tatsumi a thumbs up. "I agree." The kid got fire in his eyes. "Plus, we already took his money, we owe him this much." She walked over to Tatsumi and offered him her hand. "Well? You've seen the Empire's darkness now. Want to join us and tear it all down?" Tatsumi hesitated. The invitation was more than he could have hoped for. After seeing his friends die, after learning what really happened in the capital, he wanted nothing more than to rip away the filth that had taken them from him. But he also felt a pang of insecurity. These people were so powerful, so capable. What could someone like him possibly offer? "Do I even deserve to be here?" Tatsumi asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Wood stepped forward, his eyes filled with intensity. "Your birth doesn't define you. What defines you is what you choose to do from here on out. If you can't even muster the courage to take this step, how will you ever get stronger? How will you ever reach your dreams?" Wood's passionate words struck Tatsumi like a jolt. The dot in his eyes was replaced by determination as he reached out to take Leon's hand. "I want to join. I want to destroy the Empire's darkness." With Leon and Wood both backing Tatsumi, the final decision lay with Bullet. The muscular man stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Wood's shoulder. "Well said, Wood. You're a true man. And you, Tatsumi, welcome aboard. I believe in your potential too. One day, I expect you'll be stronger than any of us." With 3 votes in favor, Tatsumi was temporarily accepted into Night Raid. Whether he would stay would depend on Najunda, the group's leader, and her final decision. Chapter 403, The Strongest in Night Raid. In the mountains 10 kilometers north of the capital, Night Raid's base of operations was bustling. Early in the morning, newcomer Tatsumi had already risen, determined to make a good impression on his new comrades. He eagerly took on a variety of laborious tasks, hoping to prove himself to the team. A day earlier, after being brought outside the capital, Tatsumi had finally been officially accepted into Night Raid. Najunda, the leader of the organization, had taken her time to think it over before agreeing. From the events reported by Leon and the others, Najunda could tell that Tatsumi was a young man of good character. and with the strong recommendations from Wood, Bullet, and Leon, it was an easy decision. Leon was perceptive, able to read people well after her years of experience among all walks of life, and Najanda trusted her judgment. Wood and Bullet were both ex-soldiers of the Empire and incredibly powerful, so their confidence in Tatsumi's future carried a lot of weight. Believing he was showing plenty of initiative, Tatsumi woke up before dawn, only to find that many night trade members had risen even earlier. As he passed through the courtyard, he found Bullet, stripped to the waist, lifting a barbell larger than his entire body. When Bullet noticed Tatsumi, he smiled broadly and warmly invited him to join in a morning workout session filled with intense camaraderie. Tatsumi looked at his own slender arms and legs, then glanced at the massive weight Bullet was casually lifting. He swallowed hard and politely declined. He wanted to get stronger, and he didn't mind Bullet's invitation, but he had other tasks to finish first. He needed to complete his chores before starting any workout. Otherwise, after a session with Bullet, he doubted he'd have the strength to do anything else for the rest of the day. Moving on from the courtyard, Tatsumi went to the kitchen, intending to prepare breakfast for everyone. However, upon arriving, he discovered that, aside from the training fanatic Bullet, Akam had also risen before him and was getting ready to hunt for food. Tatsumi knew Akam wasn't particularly fond of him after he had interfered multiple times during the mission against Arya. To try to make amends, he offered to help Akam with the hunting. He was confident in his ability to handle ordinary animals, even if he couldn't match Akam in strength. Akam, who trusted all her comrades deeply, was happy to have Tatsumi accompany her. With two people hunting, they could bring back more prey for the group. However, Tatsumi soon found himself feeling inadequate when he realized that Akam wasn't hunting mere animals. She was hunting dangerous creatures, and not just any, but large-scale danger beasts. Seeing Tatsumi struggling, Akam suggested he fish in the river instead. Relieved, Tatsumi thought catching fish wouldn't be too hard. But he was in for another surprise. The fish in this mountain river were enormous, larger than his entire body. Though they weren't danger beasts, the sheer size of the fish made them just as hazardous when they swam in large groups. Meanwhile, Akam, as if it were the easiest thing in the world, stripped down to her undergarments and dove into the river. Moments later, she began tossing giant fish onto the riverbank with surprising ease. Seeing Akam soaked and pulling herself from the river, Tatsumi had no time to admire the sight. Instead, he felt a deep sense of inadequacy. Akam, am I the weakest person in night trade? Tatsumi couldn't help feeling frustrated. Like any new recruit, he wanted to prove himself to his colleagues. He wanted to show that he could contribute and earn their trust. But everything he had seen since arriving had shaken his confidence. Everyone in night trade was incredibly powerful, and most of them possessed imperial arms. Tatsumi felt like an outlier. It was natural for him to feel anxious about his abilities. Without using an imperial arm, yes, you're probably the weakest. Akam said, blunt as ever, after thinking for a moment. The word stung. Tatsumi was devastated. Akam wasn't the type to sugarcoat things, nor would she lie to a comrade just to make them feel better. However, Wood and Leon believe you have potential, and I trust their judgment. Akam added. Her calm voice held a hint of warmth, and those words instantly reignited Tatsumi's determination. After resolving to get stronger, Tatsumi sought out Bullet upon their return to the base. He pleaded with Bullet to train him. Though Wood had hinted at keeping a safe distance from Bullet's intense workout sessions, Tatsumi had completely forgotten that advice. Having someone eager to train with him was exactly what Bullet wanted, and he gladly accepted. Soon after, Tatsumi found himself engaged in a series of physically demanding exercises. Or rather, he was put through an exhausting series of tests by Bullet. The training was more like a match to gauge Tatsumi's abilities, and it ended as expected. Even without using his imperial arm, even fighting barehanded, Bullet easily overwhelmed Tatsumi. Bullet, you're so incredibly strong. I think you might even be stronger than Akam. Tatsumi exclaimed, lying on the ground, completely exhausted after dozens of rounds. Bullet, who was casually brushing his signature pompadour hairstyle, chuckled. Tatsumi was amazed at how effortlessly Bullet moved, even after their sparring. For Bullet, sparring with Tatsumi wasn't even enough to break a sweat. Initially, Tatsumi had thought the difference in strength between him and the other members of Night Trade lay in the imperial arms. But after sparring with Bullet and watching Akam hunt, Tatsumi now realized that, even without their weapons, these people were monsters compared to him. In a fair fight, I could probably beat Akam. Bullet said, surprising Tatsumi, who had been lying flat, catching his breath. But in a real fight to the death? I'd lose. She's lethal. And I think you have the wrong impression about who's the strongest in Night Trade. It's not me, and it's not Akam. Tatsumi propped himself up, confusion written across his face. If it's not you or Akam, then could it be Boss Najanda? Leon once told me Akam was the strongest secret weapon of the team. Tatsumi added, still puzzled. Bullet smiled and shook his head. Najunda is indeed strong, but her strength lies more in her leadership and strategy than her combat abilities. No, the strongest among us. You've met him. He was the first one to invite you to join Night Raid. The first one. Would? Tatsumi asked, his voice uncertain. It was hard for Tatsumi to believe. Wood didn't strike him as the strongest type. During their mission against Arya's family, Leon and Akam had displayed overwhelming power, while Wood seemed to mostly hang back. Plus, Wood was only slightly older than Tatsumi, and his youthful appearance made it difficult to think of him as particularly powerful. You're surprised? Bullet laughed, reading Tatsumi's expression. Not exactly. It's just. Wood doesn't seem like the type. Tatsumi admitted. Tatsumi remembered how he had first met Wood in the capital, half-drunk and goofing around with Leon. It was hard to reconcile that image with the idea of him being Night Raid's strongest member. Tatsumi, you're making the same mistake again. Bullet said, his tone serious. You think what you see is all there is. The same mistake you made with Arya. You were fooled by appearances. Wood isn't as simple as you think. Most of us in Night Raid have hidden sides that we don't show. Akam is straightforward, but Wood. He's something else entirely. I'll be honest with you, Wood is frighteningly powerful, stronger than me or even Akam. If both of us fought him together, I doubt we could win. And do you know why everyone here trusts him so much? He's saved all of us, at some point. He saved Boss Najunda multiple times. She owes her life to him. He's saved me, Akam, and many others in this group. He's the backbone of Night Raid, even if he doesn't look the part. That's why, when he suggested we take you in, no one really opposed the idea. We trust him implicitly. Hearing Bullet's explanation, Tatsumi was stunned. He remembered how Wood had saved him from Akam during the mission. It seemed that Wood's strength was far beyond what Tatsumi had imagined. But if he's so strong, why haven't I seen him fight? Tatsumi asked. Wood has a code. Bullet explained. He doesn't draw his blade against a weak. He's only interested in fighting real threats or worthwhile prey. Tatsumi felt a chill run down his spine. The image of Wood in his mind changed drastically. No longer the carefree, mischievous guy who drank with Leon, but a true monster lying in wait. After their intense morning training session, the members of Night Raid gathered in the dining area for breakfast. Mine took a sip of the meat soup, her eyes lighting up with delight. Akam, your cooking has really improved. I never knew you could make food this tasty. She exclaimed. The other members also praised the food, nodding in agreement. Tatsumi made breakfast today. Akam said between bites. Even as she spoke, her hands moved quickly, shoveling more food into her mouth. To everyone's surprise, despite her rapid eating, Akam's voice was still clear. Tatsumi couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed as he sat there. Akam's version of helping had mainly involved her taste testing the dishes. So much so that Tatsumi had ended up making a second batch just to have enough food for everyone else. Chapter 404, Tatsumi's first mission. I didn't expect you to be such a good cook, Tatsumi. Would great. Now we don't have to eat Akam's half-raw grilled meat and tasteless grilled fish anymore, Lubbock Humphrey. For a newbie, I suppose you have some use. Mine seeing everyone praise his cooking. Tatsumi felt shy and embarrassed, scratching his head in response. Alright, it's settled then. From now on, Tatsumi will be responsible for all the cooking in our group. Akam, you'll take charge of hunting food. This way, you can lighten your workload a bit. Najunda, the boss of Night Raid, declared. The decision was met with unanimous approval from the members of Night Raid, making Tatsumi the team's de facto cook. Initially, Akam seemed displeased because her job was essentially being taken over. However, when Wood pushed his uneaten portion of food towards her, her mood quickly improved. After all, Tatsumi's cooking was undeniably better than hers, and as long as she got to eat double portions by helping out, there wasn't much to be upset about. After the meal, Najunda's expression turned serious as she brought up a new mission, taking out a list of targets. This time, their client was a woman from the capital whose husband had been falsely accused and brutally killed. The ones responsible for his death were Captain Ogre of the Imperial Police and Gamal, an oil merchant. To gather the money for the assassination request, the widow had resorted to working in the red light district to support herself. When Leon had met the woman, she noticed that the client was already afflicted with a disease. Most likely a venereal one. And was unlikely to live for much longer. Bang. Upon hearing about the couple's plight, Tatsumi, burning with righteous fury, slammed his fist onto the table. Unlike the others, who remained seated in silence, listening to Najunda, Tatsumi couldn't contain his anger. It wasn't that the rest of Night Raid was indifferent. It was just that they had seen too many similar cases. The corruption and darkness of the capital ran far deeper than most people could imagine, and they had grown used to stories like this. Wood, Akam, and the others had become accustomed to the horrors of the Empire. So much so that they could remain calm. Since you seem so passionate about this, Tatsumi, why don't you take care of this mission? It might be your first mission, but it's time you started pulling your weight and getting used to your new identity. Najanda's eyes were locked onto Tatsumi, her gaze sharp. Both Tatsumi and the other members were taken aback. None of them expected Najanda to assign such a challenging target to Tatsumi so quickly. Captain Ogre, known in the capital as Ogre the Demon, was no ordinary foe. While he wasn't on the level of a general, he was still far more formidable than most of the capital's fat and lazy officials or nobles. Boss, are you serious? That ogre guy is called Ogre the Demon for a reason, and you want a newbie to go after him? If the mission fails, it will damage Night Raid's reputation. Mine protested. Tatsumi felt his confidence waver slightly as he lowered his head. Although he desperately wanted to fit in and fight against the evils of the Empire, Mine's words were true. He was a rookie, inexperienced, and weak compared to others in Night Raid. If he failed, he wouldn't just tarnish the group's reputation, he would also fail the grieving widow who had entrusted them with her husband's vengeance. The last thing Tatsumi wanted was to let her down. Not after she had sacrificed so much to hire them. Don't take what Mine says too seriously, Wood said, sensing Tatsumi's hesitation. She's a bit of a tsundere. Her bark is worse than her bite. What she really means is that she's worried about your safety since this is your first mission. Everyone familiar with Mine knew Wood wasn't wrong. Mine was notoriously prickly, but she often used harsh words to hide her true feelings. Wood, shut up. I'm not worried about this guy at all. I'm just concerned that if he messes up, it will tarnish Night Raid's reputation, and we'll lose future clients willing to hire us to assassinate the Empire's scumbags. Mine shouted, looking like a cat with its fur standing on end. She even moved to scratch at Wood, though she was quickly stopped by Shiel, who held her back gently. Najanda watched the commotion unfold with a hint of amusement before focusing on Tatsumi once more. So, Tatsumi, do you want to take on this mission? Tatsumi hesitated, but when he saw the encouraging looks from Bullet and Leon, his hesitation disappeared. He clenched his fists and looked at Najanda with determination. Yes, I want to do it. I want to avenge that couple, and I want to prove that I belong in Night Raid. Alright then. Najanda said, nodding approvingly. Tatsumi, you'll work together with Leon for this mission. Your targets are Captain Ogre and oil merchant Gamal. As Tatsumi accepted the task, Najanda's lips curled into a small smile. She admired Tatsumi's resolve. The truth was that Ogre's strength, while notable, was nothing that any member of Night Raid couldn't handle on their own. Even if Tatsumi failed, Night Raid would ensure the mission succeeded. Najanda's intention was to gauge Tatsumi's potential and willingness. If he had backed down, she would have marked him as unreliable and unsuitable for Night Raid. Once Tatsumi and Leon left the base, Najanda turned her attention to Wood and Akam. Wood, Akam, I'd like you both to accompany them as backup. Tatsumi might need your support if things go sideways. So, if he fails, we'll be the cleanup crew? Wood interrupted with a grin. Precisely. Najanda confirmed. The objective here is to give Tatsumi experience. If he manages to take down Ogre, that's great. If he doesn't, you two will ensure the mission is still a success. With Wood and Akam as the backup team, Mine seemed more at ease, and her earlier protests died down. Everyone in Night Raid knew that if Wood and Akam were working together, failure wasn't an option. Tatsumi's safety was also guaranteed. After all, whether it was Ogre or even some of the stronger figures in the capital, neither would stand a chance against the combination of the ex-assassin Akam and the incredibly powerful Wood. Leon, what should we do now? Tatsumi asked as they walked through the bustling streets of the capital. Unlike Wood and Akam, Tatsumi and Leon weren't on any wanted lists, so they could move about freely in broad daylight. But with this being Tatsumi's first mission, and given his bold words in front of the others, he couldn't shake the nerves creeping in. Relax, Tatsumi. Leon said with her characteristic grin. You're too tense. If you look too nervous, people will notice something's off. Remember, a good assassin knows how to blend in. You want to look as harmless as possible. She ruffled Tatsumi's hair affectionately. Learn to use your natural advantages. You're young, and you look innocent. People will underestimate you. That's a strength in itself. Leon glanced at Tatsumi and added. Besides, you could learn a lot from Wood and Lubbock. They're both experts at hiding their true selves. Thanks to Leon's words, Tatsumi managed to calm down a bit, though his newfound composure quickly vanished when Leon wrapped an arm around his neck. The proximity left Tatsumi very aware of the two large, soft masses pressing against him, making his face flush bright red. You sure are cute, Tatsumi. Much more innocent than Wood, at least. That kid might be young, but he never misses a chance to grope me whenever he's drunk. Ha 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 ha. While Leon and Tatsumi made their way into a bar, Wood and Akam were stationed on a nearby rooftop, watching their movements. Wood, do you really like stealing Leon's food? If that's the case, you could just ask me. I have a lot of food, and I wouldn't mind sharing. Unlike Leon, I don't hold grudges. Akam said, her eyes genuinely curious. Despite Akam's cold demeanor, she was incredibly loyal to her comrades and surprisingly generous. Hearing her words, Wood couldn't help but blush slightly. It was clear Akam had no idea what Leon meant by taking advantage. In Akam's mind, the term taking advantage only involved food. Glancing at Akam, Wood had to admit that, despite her cold personality, she had a rich figure. In fact, aside from Leon, there wasn't anyone in night raid who could compete with Akam in that regard. But no matter what, Wood knew he'd never dare do anything inappropriate to Akam. Leon's easygoing attitude was the only reason he'd ever let himself get carried away when drunk. Let's find a place to rest, Wood said, changing the subject. Leon and Tatsumi are gathering intel in that bar. They won't take action until nightfall, so we don't need to keep a constant watch. Inside the bar, Tatsumi found himself in a new kind of struggle. Keeping up with Leon's drinking. Tatsumi knew that their purpose here was to gather information about Ogre and Gamal, and the bar was the perfect place to do it, given its clientele. However, it wasn't long before Tatsumi found himself pale-faced, barely able to keep down the alcohol. Blug. In an alley behind the bar, Tatsumi was bent over, vomiting, his face a sickly shade of green. He looked as if he could collapse at any moment. Compared to Leon, who was used to bar hopping and could hold her liquor with ease, Tatsumi was hopeless. But in a place like this, you couldn't just ask around without drinking. It would arouse too much suspicion. People would start asking questions. Hey, Tatsumi. Leon said, patting his back. Maybe I should handle Ogre tonight. You can take care of Gamal. Based on the intel they had gathered, both Ogre and Gamal would be out tonight, but they would be in different areas of the capital. One in the north, the other in the south. This meant that Leon and Tatsumi would have to split up, taking one target each. If one of them failed, it would alert the other target, complicating matters. Leon, I appreciate it, but I want to handle Ogre myself. Please, give me the chance to prove myself. Tatsumi's voice was filled with determination. He had declared his intention in front of Najenda, and he had no intention of backing down now. This was his moment to prove that he was worthy of night raid. To prove to himself, his new comrades, and to those who had suffered under the Empire that he could make a difference. Chapter 405, Don't Show Off in Front of the Protagonist. The night in the capital was far less vibrant than during the day. Many spirits and monsters unseen in the daylight began their activities under the cover of darkness. There was a saying that once spread in the capital, the true capital reveals itself only at night. When the sun disappears, the darkness hidden within the city emerges and takes center stage. Ordinary citizens of the capital never chose to wander outside at night, as those who had lived there for long understood well the dangers that came with the dark. The capital at night could only be described as a paradise for criminals. The Imperial Police generally carried out their operations during the night, and Ogre the Demon, who had spent his entire day torturing prisoners, was feeling invigorated and ready to patrol the streets, hoping to find some new toys. Ogre looked like an older man with his hair slicked back, and he had a terrifying cross-shaped scar across his left eye. Due to his brutal appearance and violent nature, he had earned the nickname of the Demon. Based on the information he had gathered at the bar, Tatsumi had been hiding in a narrow alley along Ogre's expected route. As Ogre walked into the alley, Tatsumi, who had been waiting in the shadows, took the chance to spring forward, sword in hand, launching a surprise attack. On a distant rooftop, Wood and Akam watched Tatsumi's actions unfold. As they watched Tatsumi charge towards Ogre, they both shook their heads simultaneously. He really lacks experience, Wood commented, shaking his head. Choosing a narrow and quiet alley as a place to attack is good, but he needs to work on suppressing his presence. His bloodlust was so obvious, it would be hard for anyone to ignore it. And he's far too direct. If you're going for an assassination, it only makes sense to attack from behind, yet here he is rushing in from the front. Just as Wood had predicted, Tatsumi's assassination attempt failed. Based on Tatsumi's skills, if his opponent were an average soldier, the ambush would have worked, but Ogre was no average soldier. He was the captain of the Imperial Police, with combat experience far above most opponents. Tatsumi's iron sword clashed with Ogre's large machete, causing sparks to fly in the dark alley. Kid, who sent you to kill me? If you tell me, I'll grant you a quick death. Ogre sneered. He knew that he had made many enemies due to his cruel actions, and killing the assassin would be meaningless if he couldn't root out the mastermind. He needed to know who sent the boy so he could take care of them as well. Clang. With a loud metallic crash, Tatsumi's attack was blocked, and he was thrown back. Ogre was larger and stronger. Tatsumi couldn't compete in terms of sheer power. Ogre swung his heavy machete, sending Tatsumi flying with ease. Seeing that Tatsumi wasn't a match for Ogre, Akam reached for her sword. More same. Intending to help him. However, Wood stopped her, extending his hand in front of her path. Akam looked at him, puzzled. Wood simply smiled. He hasn't lost yet. Overprotectiveness won't help him grow. When he chose this path, he also chose to stand on his own. Until he's truly on the brink of death, let's just keep watching. Some people can grow stronger when they face adversity, pushing past their own limits. Wood believed that Tatsumi was one of those protagonists found in every shonen series. A hero destined for greatness. When Wood first arrived in this world, he thought Lubbock, the green-haired guy, might be the protagonist. But after observing him for a while, Wood realized that Lubbock was just a guy who was obsessed with Nagenda. In other words, he wasn't the hero of justice type you'd expect in a shonen anime. When Tatsumi showed up and connected with them, Wood knew right away that the young man from the countryside was indeed the chosen one. He had a pure and resilient personality, a strong sense of justice, and, after witnessing his friends' deaths, a newfound resolve. He also possessed a natural charisma that made people like him. Classic protagonist traits. Listening to Wood's words, Akam recalled her own brutal training within the assassin squads and ultimately agreed with him. Tatsumi had to learn to stand on his own. So, for now, she chose to hold back. In the alley, Tatsumi was initially overwhelmed, getting pushed around by Ogre. However, if one watched closely, they'd notice Tatsumi was growing. Adapting to his opponent's movements and gradually holding his own. In life or death battles, people grow quickly, and Akam acknowledged that. Still, Tatsumi's growth rate was astonishing. In mere minutes, he had adapted to Ogre's rhythm, and he was beginning to parry and counter effectively. Tatsumi wasn't becoming physically stronger. That would be too unrealistic. But he was learning how to use his existing skills more effectively. He learned to exploit his advantages. Being smaller and faster. And to use the alley's confined space to counter Ogre's attacks. Ogre's large stature and wide machete gave him tremendous power, but they were cumbersome in a narrow alley. Tatsumi used the walls to his advantage, jumping and dodging whenever Ogre swung, landing quick attacks before darting away. The fight was starting to wear Ogre down. His heavy swings cost him stamina, and being on the defensive taxed his mind as well. Tatsumi is going to win. Akam commented as she noticed the increasing number of injuries Ogre sustained. For Akam, who rarely praised others, this was a noteworthy acknowledgement of Tatsumi's growth. It's too early to say that. Wood replied, his gaze sharp. A beast is at its most dangerous when cornered. If Tatsumi lets his guard down now, it's still very possible for things to go wrong. See? I knew it. Tatsumi got overconfident, and now he's caught in Ogre's trap. Wood's words proved prophetic. Just as it seemed Tatsumi had the upper hand, Ogre suddenly turned the tables. Ogre realized that staying in the alley would mean his defeat, so he decided to break away, heading towards an open area. Tatsumi, anxious to prevent him from escaping, rushed after him. And that's when things went wrong. Chasing Ogre meant Tatsumi had to go on the offensive, and Ogre used that to his advantage. He turned suddenly, a wicked grin on his face, and swung his machete with all his strength. Tatsumi, unprepared for the sudden counter, was struck directly. Though he managed to block with his sword, the force of the blow sent him flying backward. He crashed into the wall, the impact leaving a deep dent in the brick. Tatsumi coughed up blood, feeling several ribs crack, his sword cracking as well. Dragging his machete along the ground, sparks flying from the friction, Ogre slowly advanced toward Tatsumi, who lay slumped against the wall. I'll give you one last chance, kid. Tell me who hired you, and I'll give you a quick death. Otherwise, I'll take you back to the dungeon, and you'll learn what true hell is. I'll make you tell me everything after days of torture. Ogre had genuinely feared for his life during this fight. If the boy hadn't lacked experience, Ogre might already be dead. The assassination attempt had failed, but that didn't mean there wouldn't be another. And next time, the assassin might be stronger. He needed to find the mastermind behind this. Give up. I'll never tell you who hired me. And my comrades are far stronger than I am. After my comrade takes care of your friend, the oil merchant Gamal, they'll come for you next. I'll be waiting for you in hell. Tatsumi spat defiantly, staring at Ogre. Tatsumi wasn't afraid of dying. He was only filled with regret. Regret that he wasn't strong enough to take down Ogre. Hearing Tatsumi's words, Ogre hesitated momentarily, then sneered. Oh, so you're a rookie after all, huh? You mentioned the oil merchant Gamal. Which means the person who hired you must be one of those lowly commoners we framed. Not that it matters. I'll wipe them all out tomorrow. With that, Ogre raised his machete high, ready to bring it down on Tatsumi. Watching from above, Wood and Akam prepared to intervene. But then something changed. Tatsumi's eyes flashed with a renewed determination. Hearing Ogre's plan to kill more innocent people due to his failure, Tatsumi's mind filled with images of Seo and Ayasu, his childhood friends. Wood's words echoed in his mind. He couldn't let a tragedy like that happen again. He couldn't allow Ogre to kill anyone else. The human spirit has immense potential, and that potential is often awakened through sheer will and conviction. Tatsumi's determination to stop Ogre and protect the innocent gave him newfound strength. His battered body surged with energy. He refused to die here. He refused to let anyone else suffer because of him. Wood had a term for what was happening to Tatsumi, a shaman protagonist power-up. When a protagonist tapped into this kind of strength, no villain could outshine them. No matter how powerful the enemy, if the protagonist underwent this transformation, their victory was all but assured. Ogre was nothing more than a named mid-level villain, far from a true boss. His fate was sealed the moment Tatsumi's spirit reignited. Chapter 406, A Special Training Method? Wood and Akam, who were originally preparing to save Tatsumi, watched as the young man, who seemed ready to face his demise, suddenly erupted with vigor. He charged at Ogre with nothing but a broken sword, launching a furious attack. Both of them were stunned by what they saw. But if there was anyone more surprised than them, it had to be Ogre himself, who was now Tatsumi's opponent. He couldn't understand why, just moments before, the young assassin seemed on the brink of death, only to recover completely like someone injected with adrenaline and suddenly fighting at superhuman strength. Clang! Tatsumi's cracked sword clashed with Ogre's massive blade, the resulting collision producing a deafening, thunderous sound. The force of the strike even left Ogre's arm numb, and the crazed expression on Tatsumi's face evoked a flicker of fear within him. Tatsumi had abandoned all thought of defense. His only goal was to attack, attack, attack. He was prepared to die, but before that happened, he was determined to drag Ogre down with him. This way, Ogre wouldn't be able to harm the relatives of those he had wronged any longer. Driven by sheer desperation and powered by the physical surge brought on by his awakening, Tatsumi's strikes began landing more frequently on Ogre. The repeated injuries were starting to take their toll on the captain, and his stamina and awareness were quickly fading due to excessive blood loss. You brat, I am the captain of the Imperial Guard. If you kill me. Before Ogre could finish his sentence, a bright arc of light sliced across his throat. Blood spurted from the deep wound like a fountain, and the body of Ogre crumpled lifelessly to the ground. Seeing his fallen foe, Tatsumi could feel an overwhelming exhaustion suddenly wash over him. His vision blurred, and soon his consciousness faded entirely as he collapsed in the narrow alleyway. Almost the moment Tatsumi hit the ground, Wood and Akam leaped into action, rushing to the scene. Akam hurried over to Tatsumi, checking his condition. After confirming he had no life-threatening injuries, she breathed a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Wood approached Ogre's body, shaking his head as he muttered to himself. Haven't you heard the saying, villains die from talking too much? If you're going to boast and give the protagonist time to recover, you can't complain about dying. Not long after Wood and Akam arrived, Leone followed Ogre's scent and found the alleyway. She took in the scene of Ogre's body lying in a pool of blood and Tatsumi unconscious on the ground. I knew boss would have a backup plan in place, but I didn't think it would be you two. Leone said. You misunderstand. We were here, yes, but we never actually intervened. Ogre was taken down entirely by Tatsumi. Although, it was a very close call and he still took quite a beating. Wood explained. Leone was clearly taken aback. Although she had left Ogre for Tatsumi to handle, she wasn't fully confident that Tatsumi could actually defeat him. That was why she had taken down her own target, oil merchant Gamal, as quickly as possible before rushing to provide backup. The next time Tatsumi opened his eyes, it was already morning. He was wrapped in bandages and found himself back at the night raid base. Tatsumi couldn't remember how he got back, but he did remember defeating his mission target, Ogre the Demon. When Tatsumi emerged from his room, still covered in bandages, the other members of Night Raid were busy with their usual activities. But when they noticed Tatsumi, their reactions varied. Bullet and Leone greeted him warmly with approving smiles. Shiel and Lubbock nodded in acknowledgement, while even mine, the most standoffish, glanced at Tatsumi before turning away with a sharp Humphrey. In that moment, Tatsumi finally felt a sense of recognition from his comrades. He was finally a part of Night Raid. Tatsumi, you did a good job last night. For the next few days, take it easy and recover here at the base. With the death of the captain of the Imperial Guard, the capital is in chaos right now. We won't be taking any missions for a while. Najenda, the leader of Night Raid, told him. Hearing the report from Akam and Wood, Najunda was quite pleased with Tatsumi's performance. He had a strong sense of justice and showed impressive potential. While his combat experience was lacking, that was something that could be learned over time. His determination, however, was invaluable. With the current turmoil in the capital, the night trade members had a few days of rare respite. Even during their downtime, Bullet continued his relentless training regimen. Tatsumi, wanting to join him, was rejected by Bullet due to his injuries. Training is good, Bullet said. But you also need to understand your limits. Your body isn't fully recovered yet, and pushing it now could end up doing more harm than good. Denied the opportunity to train, Tatsumi was left with nothing to do. Staying in bed bored him, so he decided to find the two remaining male members of Night Trade, Wood and Lubbock. Bullet had told him before that Wood was the strongest member of Night Trade. After everything that had happened, Tatsumi was more determined than ever to grow stronger. He was eager to learn anything that would help him from someone like Wood. At the edge of the Night Trade base, deep within a secluded bamboo forest, two figures, Wood and Lubbock, were engaged in what seemed to be some secretive plotting. Are you sure about this spot, Lubbock? Wood asked with some doubt. Other members aside, Akam and mine have incredibly sharp senses. Akam, because she's an elite assassin, and mine because her skills as a sniper have made her highly perceptive. The green-haired young man, Lubbock, looked quite unhappy with Wood's doubts, quickly defending himself. Are you kidding me? My Tegu, Crosstail, can support the weight of all the Night Trade members. We're only two people, there's no way it'll be an issue. Besides, this is the best spot. I've scouted it out many times. There's no way either mine or Akam would detect us here. Hearing Lubbock's confident reply, Wood finally nodded in relief. Alright, I think it's about time then. They synchronized their watches and then both jumped, landing on a thin steel wire created by Crosstail. From their vantage point, they crawled forward, peering over the wall shrouded in steam. There were faint female voices and the sound of water splashing below them. Just as Wood and Lubbock were about to use their titanium-grade eyes to pierce through the steam and take in the view, a third figure appeared out of nowhere. Wood. Lubbock. I've been looking everywhere for you guys. What are you? Seeing Wood and Lubbock suspended in the air, Tatsumi thought they might be engaged in some unique form of training. He called out to them just as a blur moved at lightning speed and clamped a hand over his mouth. Before Tatsumi could react, he found himself dragged off into the bamboo forest. The person dragging him moved so quickly and with such force that Tatsumi had no chance to resist. When he finally gathered his senses, he realized that he was already hundreds of meters away from where he had started. Wood styled Tatsumi's mouth and turned, his face flushed with a mix of panic and irritation. Tatsumi, do you have any idea how close you came to getting us killed? What we were doing back there? It's life or death, you understand? One slip up, and we'd be beyond saving. Wood's words, spoken with such seriousness, made Tatsumi gulp hard. He stammered out an apology. I'm really sorry. I just wanted to talk to you two. He scratched his head awkwardly. Were you guys doing some kind of special training? Hearing Tatsumi's innocent question, a look of admiration crossed his face. Tatsumi thought to himself that Bullet had been right. Wood might look like someone who didn't take things seriously, but in reality, he never stopped training, never relaxed. Seeing the look of pure admiration in Tatsumi's eyes, Wood couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Still, he had to maintain his image, so he decided to double down. Well, now that you've seen it, there's no helping it. Yes, Lubbock and I were doing a very special kind of training. Wood put on his best serious face. We were training our ability to hide our presence and improve our vision. You understand how important these skills are for an assassin, right? Tatsumi nodded fervently. He remembered very well how crucial concealing his presence was during his attempt to assassinate Ogre. If he had been able to properly hide his presence, he could have dealt a lethal blow during the initial ambush, and it wouldn't have turned into such a drawn-out fight. Wood's explanation caused even Lubbock to blush slightly. Though Lubbock prided himself on having a thick skin, even he had his limits. He couldn't believe that Wood was managing to make their peeping escapade sound like some holy mission. And worse still, Tatsumi was buying every word. Wood, can I join you guys for this training? Tatsumi's eyes were full of determination. I want to get stronger, to stop being a burden, and to become a real assassin. Wood was left momentarily speechless. He realized he might have gone too far with his bluff. He had managed to talk himself into a corner. Wood, we're running out of time. Lubbock warned, looking up at the sky. If we delay any longer, they'll be gone. Tomorrow Leon and Akam will be heading into the capital, and mine and Shiel are going out on a mission. It might be a while before we have this chance again. Hearing Lubbock's reminder, Wood started to panic. However, Tatsumi remained stubborn, insisting on joining them for what he believed to be death training. Fine, fine. You can join us, but there's a condition. You must promise me that no matter what you see or hear, you'll remain completely calm and absolutely silent, got it? If you make a sound, you'll put all our lives at risk. And remember, no matter what happens, you can't sell out your comrades. Tatsumi's eyes widened, and he quickly nodded. He could see from Wood's expression that this was serious. Although he didn't know what exactly the training entailed, it was clear that it involved real danger. Wood, are you really going to let Tatsumi join in? What if he cracks under pressure and gives us away? Lubbock whispered, still unsure. I promise, no matter what happens, I'll never betray you two. Tatsumi said, puffing his chest out. He might not be the strongest, but he wasn't someone who would betray his comrades. He swore on his very soul that he would keep their secrets. Chapter 407, The turmoil of the capital outside of Nitrade's compound. 3 figures balanced on the thin wires of Crosstail, where previously only 2 had stood. Indeed, Wood and Lubbock had finally allowed Tatsumi to join them in their so-called death training. After Tatsumi had sworn various oaths and refused to back down, Lubbock felt that continuing to refuse would jeopardize the camaraderie among teammates. Besides, they didn't have much time left to hesitate anyway. As Tatsumi jumped onto the wire, he kept Wood's earlier words in mind, suppressing his presence as much as possible. He also reminded himself that no matter what happened next, he couldn't make a sound. Splash! The sound of water echoed from the bath below the wall, and Wood and Lubbock, timing it just right, peeked over. What greeted their eyes was an expanse of white. The shimmering skin of 4 bathing women. Leon and Akam were impressive to behold, Shiel wasn't too far behind, and mine had very little to look at. Despite all the preparation Tatsumi had made, the sight still overwhelmed him. His brain seemed to crash instantly. In his panic, the carefully hidden presence he maintained slipped out, and his startled movements made a noise. Almost immediately, Wood leaped off the wall. With incredible speed, he employed the 6 powers technique instant transmission and moonwalk, disappearing into the bamboo grove in an instant. Seeing Wood vanish without hesitation, Lubbock quickly reacted as well. He tried to use the crosstail wires as a pendulum to swing away from the wall. Unfortunately for him, before he could escape, the wire anchored to the bamboo was cut by a sudden beam of energy. No need to guess. The one who had fired the shot was mine. Now wrapped in a bath towel and wielding her imperial weapon, Pumpkin. With the crosstail wires cut, Lubbock dropped unceremoniously to the ground. As he looked up, he found himself staring at Shiel, who had her enormous pair of scissors. Ixtase pointed at his neck. As for Tatsumi, he was still stuck on the wall, frozen in place. Akam was standing before him, her sheathed sword resting against his neck, her gaze cold and piercing. Clearly, Tatsumi had not yet recovered from what had just happened. Minutes later, in the Nitrade meeting hall, 2 boys, one with green hair and the other with brown, knelt on the floor, performing a full doja, bowing low. You two are really something. Sneaking a peek at us bathing? Looks like you don't need your heads anymore, huh? And you, the newbie. I was just starting to recognize you after the last mission, but now you're learning the worst habits. Following this pervert Lubbock to spy on us? Among the 4 women present, Akam was cold and expressionless. She rarely spoke, preferring actions over words. Shiel, a timid soul, stood quietly behind mine, her scissors ready to serve as a deterrent if necessary. As for Leon, she was her usual easygoing self, entirely unconcerned about being seen naked. In short, mine was the only one putting on the pressure, venting her anger. We weren't even looking at her flat chest. Before Lubbock could finish, his voice was cut off. Or rather, a large barrel was shoved into his mouth. It was the barrel of Pumpkin, and mine's finger rested threateningly on the trigger. Both Lubbock and Tatsumi were covered in bruises. Lubbock didn't doubt that if he said anything else to provoke mine, the next thing he tasted would be a laser beam through his skull. He wisely decided to shut up. I'm giving you one last chance. Was there anyone else involved besides you two? Mine jabbed Pumpkin into Lubbock's mouth for emphasis, her finger tapping on the trigger. Shiel's ecstase hovered close to Tatsumi's face, making him feel a chill run down his spine. Thinking only of saving himself, Lubbock almost ratted out Wood but stopped when he saw Tatsumi repeatedly shaking his head, indicating that they were the only ones involved. Seeing Tatsumi's insistence, Lubbock remembered their earlier agreement: no matter what happened, they wouldn't give up their accomplice. As much as he hated to admit it, he respected Tatsumi's sense of loyalty. Reluctantly, Lubbock shook his head. I think it's just them. Shiel chimed in. Bullet's only interested in training and muscles. Besides, I don't think he'd be into women in this way. As for Wood, I trust him. I don't think he'd do something like this. Akam nodded in agreement, and even mine, after a moment's thought, had to agree. There were few men in Night Raid, and none of them, apart from Lubbock and Tatsumi, were particularly suspicious. Bullet was out of the question. Everyone knew he only cared about strength and training. As for Wood, his reputation among Night Raid was quite solid. Akam, for one, respected his strength and knew of his heroics from Najenda, especially the times he stayed behind to cover the retreats. Mine respected Wood for saving her during a particularly dangerous mission. She owed him her life after he had saved her from pursuing soldiers and later recruited her to Night Raid. Overall, many in Night Raid had benefited from Wood's heroics, making his reputation within the group rather formidable. Still, there were those who knew better. Lubbock, who had grown up with Wood, and Leon, his drinking buddy. Lubbock knew Wood well. Though he was undeniably strong and charismatic, Wood was still very much a scoundrel, the same type as himself. Lubbock remembered that it was Wood who had suggested this mission in the first place, and it was Wood's claim that even Najenda might be present that had tempted him to join. Leon, too, had experienced Wood's antics firsthand. She knew well how he acted when drunk. Then there was Tatsumi. The poor guy still harbored illusions about Wood, thinking their training had been a legitimate exercise. He believed he had been caught only because he couldn't hide his presence well enough. Ultimately, the decision on Lubbock and Tatsumi's punishment was made. As fellow members of Night Raid, execution was off the table, but some retribution was still in order. Lubbock, deemed the mastermind, was assigned all the dirty chores for the next month. Tatsumi, meanwhile, would act as a slave for Mine and the others for an entire day, catering to their every whim without complaint. The capital was in chaos. Recently, a group known as Night Raid had emerged and assassinated Captain Ogre of the Imperial Guard. Not long after, they killed the Prime Minister's relative, Hoyan, and the notorious Imperial weapon wielder, Zanku the Executioner, as well as two of the minister's dogs. Because of all the recent deaths, particularly those involving notable figures, Night Raid had quickly gone from an obscure name to one that struck terror throughout the capital. Not just the common people, but even high-ranking officials and nobles feared this mysterious group of assassins. The imperial government tried its best to portray Night Raid as evil, but anyone with eyes could see the truth. The people Night Raid targeted were all corrupt individuals. The nobles and bureaucrats of the capital, especially those in the Prime Minister's faction, were terrified. They feared that Night Raid could target them next, especially those who had dirtied their hands and feared retribution. Minister Honest, we cannot go on like this. If we let these assassins run amok any longer, we'll lose our supporters one by one. I have it on good authority that two of our own have already fled the capital with their families and wealth. One noble, looking distressed, spoke out. They were gathered in a dark, lavish hall, filled with men in silk and velvet robes, their bellies bulging with opulence. At the head of the room sat a giant of a man, his age showing in his graying hair and beard. He was Minister Honest, the one who wielded the true power in the Empire. The very person whom Night Raid had marked as their ultimate target. Minister Honest listened as the nobles voiced their concerns, all the while eating from an oversized slice of pizza, not bothering to hide his indifference. After the death of the previous emperor, Honest had been left in charge as regent for the young prince. But Honest was no altruistic guardian, he was a man of incredible cunning and malice. The young prince trusted Honest implicitly, to the point where he wouldn't make a single decision without consulting him. In truth, Honest was the one running the empire, the young emperor nothing more than a puppet. The question was often raised. Why didn't Honest simply get rid of the emperor and take the throne himself? The answer was simple, Honest was shrewd and calculating. Installing himself as emperor would invite the ire of loyalists like General Bdo and others in the royalist faction. It was easier to let the emperor remain as a figurehead while Honest held the true power. It allowed him to wield authority without becoming a direct target. Minister, you must do something. Bam. One of the nobles raised his voice, frustration seeping in. But before he could finish, Honest grabbed the back of his head, slamming it down onto the table with an audible crack. The one thing I hate more than anything. Honest growled. Is someone interrupting me while I'm eating? He looked around the room, his eyes cold and calculating. A few assassins have you quaking in your boots. I've already got word that Hasdith is returning from the borders soon. When she arrives, I'll have the Emperor order her to deal with these pests called Night Raid. The nobles fell silent, too afraid to meet Honest's gaze. As the minister left the room, whispers broke out among those gathered. Hasdith is coming back? That's perfect. With her strength, Night Raid doesn't stand a chance. She'll wipe them out without breaking a sweat. Hasdith's reputation preceded her. Known throughout the empire as its strongest warrior. Even Minister Honest had to treat her with respect, as her power and popularity far outstripped his. She was the empire's mightiest weapon, and as long as she had no ambitions for the throne, Honest saw her as the perfect tool to crush any and all opposition. Chapter 408, Wood, wanna spar? So General Hasdith is coming back? Big deal. What does a few days even mean? 5 days? 10 days? The minister's just stalling. Nitrate has gone completely mad, and who knows if tonight I'll be assassinated in my own mansion. He is fine, hiding away in the palace, fooling around with the former emperor's women, and being protected by the royal guards, just like the young emperor. Of course, he doesn't have to worry about Nitrate coming into the palace to kill him. The person speaking was the unfortunate soul whose head had been slammed into the table by the minister. This guy was lucky. Minister Honest, while huge, wasn't exactly a powerhouse. Though he was left with a cracked skull, head bleeding profusely, at least he was still alive. The blow seemed to have awakened some clarity in him. He left the palace holding his injured head, leaving the others looking at each other, unsure what to do. Everyone understood the truth, but what could they do? They joined the minister's faction because of his influence, and they had been needing well ever since. Now, to betray the minister? None of them had the guts. Their only hope now was for Nitrate not to target them, and for Asdith to return as soon as possible to bring the situation under control. Are you saying that Asdith is returning to the capital soon? At Nitrate's headquarters, Najunda summoned the group, sharing this shocking news. Yes, the source is reliable. It was provided by a high-ranking member of the minister's faction who leaked it to me. Najunda took a drag of her cigarette, her expression becoming serious. She knew better than anyone what it meant if Asdith were to return to the capital. Someone from the minister's faction? Is that kind of guy really trustworthy? Mine scoffed. And is Asdith really as strong as the rumors say? Even if she's powerful, she's just one person. Never underestimate Asdith. Najunda interrupted Mine's skepticism. Her power goes far beyond your imagination. And don't think numbers will matter to her. She once single-handedly annihilated over 10,000 elite troops of the southwestern tribes. Everyone, except for Wood and Lubbock, hadn't seen Asdith in action. Even a common Bullet, who had previously served in the Empire, had only heard about her strength. Annihilated 10,000 elite troops of the southwestern tribes. All by herself? Is she even human? Mine murmured, shaken. Mine belonged to a weaker tribal minority that was often oppressed. The southwestern tribes, however, were known for their fierce warriors, frequently clashing with the Empire's border forces. For someone to instantly slaughter over 10,000 of these warriors. This wasn't just power. It was monstrous. The source of this information should be trustworthy. Najunda continued. The member of the minister's faction who leaked this has willingly given up most of his wealth and agreed to become a spy for the Revolutionary Army, just to save his own skin and avoid becoming a target. For nobles who valued wealth above all else, surrendering their riches was a sign of utter desperation. Plus, by leaking such sensitive information, he had likely closed off any possibility of being accepted back by the minister's side. As for the exact date of her return, we don't know. But for now, we should lay low and avoid any operations in the capital. With her personality, Asdith won't stay in the capital for long. Once she leaves, we can resume our activities. Najunda wasn't being cowardly, her wariness came from the deep impression Asdith had left on her. Simply put, if Nitrate continued their usual two-person missions and ran into Asdith, it was likely only Wood would make it back alive. Akom's imperial weapon was powerful, but it was more of a final trump card. Even with her strongest moves, Najunda doubted she could take Asdith head-on. The timing simply wasn't right, she didn't want to face Asdith prematurely. Once Najunda dismissed everyone, the members of Nitrate stayed back, chatting among themselves. Naturally, most of the discussion revolved around Asdith, who even Najunda feared. Hey, Bullet. Is this General Asdith really as powerful as the boss says? Tatsumi had been with Nitrate for a little over a month now. He had grown significantly stronger, having killed the Prime Minister's relative and the assassin Zanku, who wielded an imperial weapon. All this success had inflated his confidence somewhat. To him, Asdith was still just an imperial weapon user. Everyone in Nitrate except for him had an imperial weapon, and he had seen firsthand the strength of people like Bullet and Wood. Akom was also exceptionally strong. With such a powerful team, why fear a single imperial general? It wasn't just Tatsumi who felt this way. Leon, too, was eager to fight, cracking her knuckles and looking like she wanted a piece of Asdith. The boss isn't exaggerating. Lubbock suddenly spoke up from where he leaned against the wall. Asdith is insanely strong. When Najunda, Wood, and I defected from the Empire, she's the one they sent after us. Najunda and I could hardly put up a fight. It was Wood who stayed behind to buy us time to escape. After that battle, Wood barely made it back and ended up collapsing from exhaustion for a day and a night. Frankly, 100 of you wouldn't stand a chance against her. Tatsumi's eyes widened in shock. 100 of me. He pointed at himself in disbelief, unable to fathom being reduced to a mere measuring unit. If you all are so curious about Asdith's power, and since we have some free time, why not spar a little? Wood said, seeing the expressions of Tatsumi and Leon. Leon, especially, looked skeptical despite Nagenda's warning. To prevent Leon's stubbornness from getting her killed someday. Like challenging Asdith solo, only for the rest of them to have to recover her body. Wood decided it was better to show his teammates the gap between them. That's a great idea. Leon grinned. I've been wanting to fight you for a while now. Count me in as well. Bullet added, cracking his neck. Consider it part of today's training. As soon as Wood spoke, Leon and Bullet were already raring to go. They were both visibly excited. This was a chance they'd been waiting for. Everyone in Night Raid knew that Wood was powerful, but he rarely showed his true abilities. The missions they had undertaken had not involved any real threats, and opportunities to challenge Wood had always been dismissed with various excuses. So the prospect of sparring with Wood was thrilling. Are you sure about this? Tatsumi asked hesitantly, recalling what he had been told about Imperial weapons, that when two wielders fought, one would inevitably die. Not if it's just a sparring session without killing intent. Akam clarified, stepping forward to join. Clearly, she intended to participate as well. Mine and Shiel were initially uninterested, but seeing everyone else join in made them reconsider. They were also curious to see for themselves just how strong Asdith must be if Najenda feared her so much. Lubbock, however, simply leaned against the wall, raising his hands in surrender. Count me out. I already know how powerful Asdith is. I don't need to be reminded of it. Lubbock knew Wood too well. While everyone else had only vague notions of his strength, Lubbock knew for certain how monstrous Wood was. His bruises from Leon beating him for spying had only just healed, and he didn't want to end up hurt again. Bullet, do you want to go first, or should I? Leon asked, her eyes locked on Wood. She was eager to test herself but thought letting Bullet gauge Wood's strength first wouldn't be a bad idea. No need to complicate things. Wood smiled. You can come at me together if you like. And if you use your Imperial weapons, I will use mine as well to avoid getting beaten to death by you all. The rest of Night Raid scowled at Wood's words. They all knew he was strong, but challenging all of them at once seemed overconfident. Even arrogant. Are you kidding? Leon began, but before she could finish her sentence, Wood vanished from her sight. Her beast instincts triggered an alarm, and before she could react, Wood had already appeared behind her. She barely had time to turn when his fist aimed at her face. With no other option, Leon crossed her arms in front of her to shield herself. Boom. Wood's punch collided with Leon's arms, creating a shockwave that rippled outward. Though she managed to block it, Leon was far from okay. The next instant, her body was flung backward like a missile, smashing through a nearby wall. Now, do you understand? Wood said, his voice calm. I'm not being arrogant by suggesting you come at me all at once. Based on my own abilities, I doubt any of you would last more than a few exchanges in a one-on-one battle with me. Seeing Leon taken out in a flash, the rest of Night Raid was left speechless. Excluding Bullet and Akam, Leon was probably the best at close-quarters combat among them. Yet she had been completely overwhelmed by Wood in an instant. If Wood had attacked Shiel, Mine, or Tatsumi instead, there was no doubt they would have been incapacitated already. They simply didn't have Leon's beast-like reflexes. Just moments after Leon was sent flying, another figure darted toward Wood. Bullet drew his sword, bringing it down powerfully at Wood. Clang. Their weapons collided, metal clashing and sparks flying. Using weapons is fine. Bullet grinned, holding his Imperial weapon, Incursio, against Wood's own blade. I prefer it over bare-knuckle fighting. No problem. Wood smiled back. I also prefer using a sword over hand-to-hand combat. Our weapons are similar types, too. And if I recall correctly, Bullet, your favorite weapon is actually a spear, right? Incursio, Bullet's Imperial weapon, was an armor-type weapon similar to Wood's. Forged from the materials of the fearsome dragon-type danger beast tyrant. Incursio boasted incredible defensive power. However, its great strength came with a heavy burden, one that only those with a strong body could bear. Chapter 409, the most troublesome combination. Because it was a similar type of Imperial weapon, Wood was familiar with Incursio's nature. When not activated, it took the form of a sword wielded by Bullet. Once activated, Incursio transformed into a full set of armor, and Bullet's weapon would then shift into a long spear called the red-backed shrike. Thus, Bullet was actually more skilled with a spear than a sword, favoring the large, sweeping attacks characteristic of spear combat. As Wood's feet cracked the wooden planks on the ground, he used one arm to lift and throw Bullet, who was gripping his sword with both hands. And with Bullet's body now weightless in midair, Wood swiftly followed up with a blinding barrage of high-speed strikes. Bullet was exceptionally powerful, even among the Empire's generals, and his skill was amongst the very best. Without relying on his Imperial weapon, Wood considered Bullet to be even stronger than Najenda, and possibly even the Empire's great General Do. Bullet's indomitable spirit, his ironclad physique, and his relentless training had shaped him into someone who could overpower most Imperial weapon users without needing his own. Despite all this, in his bout against Wood's relentless offensive, Bullet found himself completely on the defensive, continuously forced back. As he desperately parried Wood's strikes, Bullet couldn't help but be astonished. Each of Wood's blows carried tremendous weight. His speed was overwhelming, his strength unmatched, and his seemingly chaotic attacks were executed with such precision that they constantly exploited the weak points in Bullet's defense. He could barely fight back, let alone counter. Bullet couldn't understand how Wood, despite being much younger, had honed himself to such an extent. Swordsmanship could be explained away as a talent, but strength and speed? Those could only be achieved through the harshest of training. Bullet had served in the army from a young age and had never slacked in his training. Yet here was Wood, faster and stronger by a margin that left Bullet feeling helpless. As Bullet struggled against Wood, the fight drew the attention of Akam. Feeling an itch to test herself, she decided to join in. Akam's imperial weapon was Mora's aim, a cursed blade that could kill with a single cut. Naturally, she wouldn't use its deadly power against a comrade. Instead, she kept the sword sheathed, swinging the entire weapon with its scabbard. Because Mora's aim was so deadly, even its sheath was specially crafted to be extraordinarily durable. With Akam joining in, she and Bullet managed to fend off Wood's attacks. Eventually, the fight spilled out from their headquarters into the larger training ground where Bullet usually practiced. With more space, Bullet and Akam could better leverage their skills. In one exchange, a new figure quickly joined the fray, aiming a sneak attack at Wood's back. Thanks to his observation hockey, Wood foresaw the attack. He hadn't even turned around before countering. With one hand, he blocked both Akam's sheathed blade and Bullet's sword, while with his free hand, he launched a punch behind him at the incoming attacker. Boom! A large and a smaller fist collided, producing a shockwave that shattered the stone beneath them. Wood skidded several meters backward before stopping himself, and the assailant gracefully twisted midair, landing atop a nearby rooftop. The one who launched the attack was none other than Leone, the same Leone who had previously been punched away by Wood. Now, she had activated her imperial weapon. Lionel, transforming into her beast-like form, complete with feline ears and a tail. Lionel didn't just grant Leone powerful regeneration, it also greatly enhanced her physical abilities. Leone's intention had been to repay Wood for the punch that sent her flying earlier, taking advantage of the chaos to sneak up on him. Yet, even after using her imperial weapon, and launching a surprise attack while Wood was engaged with both Bullet and Akam, Leone had still failed. She hadn't just failed, her punch felt like hitting solid steel, leaving her fist numb from the impact. After Leone's attack, Bullet and Akam took a step back to reassess. Meanwhile, perched on a distant rooftop, a certain pink-haired tsundere girl smirked. "Got you. Looks like I win this time." Mine pulled the trigger on Pumpkin, her romantic sniper rifle. The beam shot forth with incredible speed, targeting Wood who had just paused after dealing with Leone's attack. Nobody expected Mine to be so in tune with the ebb and flow of the battle. Wood had just fought Bullet and Akam, avoided Leone's ambush, and looked as though he'd be too worn out to avoid Mine's shot. Surely, this was a chance for her to claim victory. The pink beam surged towards Wood, and Bullet and Akam lowered their weapons slightly, while Leone grinned, confident of victory. But the unexpected happened. Facing the oncoming beam, Wood showed no intention of dodging. There was no panic in his expression, he calmly extended his hand, and his arm began to change, taking on the appearance of jet black metal. Armament hockey, iron fist, star strike. Wood unleashed a punch to meet the beam. His blackened fist shot forth, leaving a dark streak in the air like a comet. Boom! In an instant, the beam fired from Pumpkin was deflected by Wood's fist, veering off course and smashing through a distant wall before disappearing into the sky. No way! Pumpkin's shot was deflected with a punch. Not only Mine, but all the other members of Night Raid were left dumbstruck. They were all familiar with Pumpkin's power. Even though Mine hadn't felt any particular sense of danger and thus the shot was at a normal power level, it was still strong enough to seriously injure a large danger beast. Yet Wood had just punched it aside. Is Wood even human? Tatsumi muttered, voicing the thoughts of everyone present. To be fair, the coordination of Night Raid had been impeccable. The members showcased their exceptional skills in a relentless barrage of attacks that felt like an unending storm. Even Tatsumi, who had just been observing, couldn't find a proper moment to join the fight. But despite the combined assault, Wood remained unperturbed. He was not only unharmed, he was calm and composed, as though the intense combat was merely a warm-up. Wood's strength really is monstrous, huh? Lubbock, leaning against a wall, understood the looks of disbelief on everyone's faces. He patted Tatsumi on the shoulder. Trust me, since the day I've known him, I've lost count of how many times I've felt this way. No one in Night Raid knew Wood as well as Lubbock did. Even he wasn't sure how powerful Wood could be when serious, but he knew for certain, Wood still wasn't going all out. Good luck, Tatsumi. Hope you don't end up bedridden for too long. Lubbock's voice carried a hint of amusement as he subtly distanced himself from Tatsumi. Why? Because Lubbock noticed that Wood was looking their way. Judging by the glint in Wood's eyes, Lubbock could tell that Tatsumi was next on his list. Wait, what do you mean? Tatsumi looked confused, but he quickly understood. Wood, who had been standing in the middle of the field, suddenly charged towards him, sword in hand. Out of everyone there, Tatsumi was the least threatening. He hadn't even joined the fight. Why would Wood target him first? Clang. In a hurried attempt, Tatsumi managed to parry Wood's strike with his sword. Compared to even just a few weeks ago, Tatsumi had grown considerably stronger. This was the reason Wood targeted him. True, Tatsumi might be the least impressive of Night Raid in terms of power, especially since he didn't wield an imperial weapon. But Wood still considered him the greatest potential threat. Because, in his mind, Tatsumi was the child of the world. The child of the world is the type of person whose strength, for some inexplicable reason, could grow exponentially in dire moments. Just to be safe and avoid any main character's sudden power-ups, Wood figured he'd put Tatsumi out of commission early. Despite managing to block the strike, Tatsumi wasn't on Wood's level. The force of the blow sent him flying back like an arrow shot from a bow. Seeing Tatsumi soaring backward, Wood kicked off the ground, pursuing him at high speed. As Wood closed in and prepared to deliver a hand chop to end the fight, his observation haki suddenly sensed danger. Without hesitation, Wood aborted his attack on Tatsumi, instantly lifting his sword to guard. Thunk. At that exact moment, a blood-red spear crashed against Wood's blade with tremendous force. The impact reverberated through Wood's arm, almost causing him to lose his grip on the sword. A split second later, a powerful gust swept across the field, creating a series of shockwaves behind Wood. The next moment, he was launched backward like a cannonball. For the first time since the start of the battle, Wood was visibly forced back. Even when Leon had activated Lionel, she could only match Wood. This time, however, Wood had genuinely been repelled. The one who attacked was none other than Bullet, who had activated his imperial weapon, Incursio, and wielded the blood-red spear called Red-Backed Shrike. Wood skidded across the ground, his feet digging into the earth as he tried to regain control, sliding dozens of meters before finally stopping. Bullet, so you're finally getting serious? Wood asked, a glint of excitement in his eyes as he looked at Bullet, who stood there now fully clad in the white armor lined with red markings of Incursio. No matter what, Tatsumi is someone I have set my hopes on. It wouldn't sit well with me if he got taken down this quickly. Tatsumi, you've always wondered how strong the top members of Night Raid are, right? Well, now's your chance. Stand by my side, and let's fight together. Having been saved by Bullet, Tatsumi was overcome with emotion. He looked up at Bullet with a gaze full of admiration, and as he turned back to face Wood, there was no more fear in his eyes. Only determination. Yes, Bullet-senpai. Bullet twirled his spear, charging towards Wood. Tatsumi followed close behind, sword in hand. As they advanced, they crisscrossed their movements, coordinating perfectly. Each move complementary, ensuring they could cover each other while maintaining pressure on Wood. This is exactly why I hate fighting against a bromance and a hot-blooded rookie. Together, they're the most troublesome combination. Wood frowned, watching the duo rush at him. Bromance combined with youthful determination. Such a pair was always the strongest combination in any battle manga. No exceptions. Chapter 410, Tatsumi, is this Wood's imperial arm? In a classic battle manga, bromance can be a poetic term for genuine friendship, also called a deep bond. When that bond is combined with a burst of passionate fighting spirit, it creates a powerful chemical reaction, often leading to an overwhelming boost in strength for the characters involved. And if the character is the so-called main protagonist, their power level basically goes through the roof, almost like cheating. After Bullet activated Incursio, his physical abilities were significantly enhanced, to the point where he could match Wood, even when Wood was using armament haki. Combined with his martial skill, Bullet even managed to go head-to-head with Wood without being overwhelmed. As for Tatsumi, who seemed to be fueled by Bullet's resolve, his fighting ability also increased tremendously. Though it wasn't yet a substantial threat to Wood, it did create additional distractions and made things more complicated for him. Watching from the sidelines, the other members of Night Raid were stunned by the scene before them. The clash of blades, sparks flying, and the constant cracking of the ground beneath them. Don't look down on me. I don't care if you're the so-called 100 Slayer, I'm the real 10,000 Slayer. Perhaps feeling the pressure from Bullet and Tatsumi's combined spirit, Wood decided to unleash his full power after holding back for some time. I'm done playing games, he declared as his presence surged. He unleashed his true strength, and the atmosphere around him shifted. Hyaki Yage's sword style, one sword style, Atachi. A fierce gale roared forth, a tornado of slicing winds carving a deep trench across the ground in front of Wood. Seeing the incoming windstorm, Bullet instantly moved to protect Tatsumi, positioning himself in front. With his spear, red-backed shrike, Bullet swung the heavy weapon as if it were weightless, creating a defense against the oncoming assault. The long spear spun faster and faster, generating what looked like a massive wind turbine in front of him. As the blades of wind struck Bullet's spinning spear, they clanged like metal against metal. Even with his skill, Bullet could not fully neutralize the slicing winds. Some of the dispersed air blades made it through and left thin white scratches across his armor. Wood, sensing an opportunity to go on the offensive, moved to finish off the troublesome pair. But before he could strike, two more interlopers jumped into the fray. Seeing Bullet in danger, both Akam and Leon attacked in perfect unison. Akam swung her sheathed morass aim from one side, while Leon's fist cut through the air from the other. Wood frowned but adjusted quickly. He held his long sword horizontally and let out a bellow. Demon God Descent, Frost Knight. A wave of blue energy enveloped Wood, and the temperature around him plummeted. His sword seemed to burst with freezing energy as a large dragon-like creature appeared behind him, with glowing red eyes and scales of icy blue. The dragon roared to the heavens, its massive icy claws wrapping protectively around Wood's body. Almost immediately, two armored hands, now covered in gleaming blue armor, shot out of the mist. One hand grabbed Leon's fist, and the other caught Akam's sheathed blade. Before they knew it, the two found themselves at the mercy of Wood's inhuman strength. Their bodies were swung through the air, and with a great twist, they were hurled out of the fight, sent flying by the sheer force of Wood's throw. This time, I've got a shot charged for a while. And the sense of danger is strong enough. There's no way Wood can deflect it again, shouted Mine from her rooftop perch. She had been preparing, waiting for the perfect moment. Pumpkin's power was determined by the wielder's emotions. Specifically, their sense of crisis. The greater the sense of danger, the more powerful the shot. Balancing the need for crisis with maintaining a sniper's cool head was a paradox Mine had learned to master. The pink beam erupted from Pumpkin, shattering the rooftop beneath Mine's feet and causing her small frame to recoil a few steps from the impact. The thick beam of energy screamed towards Wood, crossing the distance in an instant. It tore through the air, threatening to overpower him entirely. Hyaki Yage's sword style, one sword draw, Snow Maiden. Wood's icy blue blade left an arc through the air, releasing a crescent-shaped blue slash. It met the incoming energy head-on. The two forces collided, the blast from their clash sending fierce winds roaring across the battlefield. The energy clash between Pumpkin's beam and Wood's blade caused a spiderweb of cracks to spread across the earth as if it were glass. Soon, Mine realized, with shock, that her beam was being cut in half, cleaved by Wood's crescent slash. The pink energy, like a cucumber being halved, was split apart as the crescent attack continued its way towards her. The destructive energy might have lessened in power by the time it reached Mine, but she was not a frontline fighter. Unlike the others, she wasn't physically tough, and getting hit by this slash would put her in real danger. Wood saw this and prepared to use instant transmission, his rapid movement technique, to protect her. But before he could act, another figure intervened. Sheil stepped in front of Mine, wielding her massive scissor-like imperial weapon, Ecstase. The weapon was said to be capable of cutting through anything. Sheil braced herself, her scissors raised defensively. Though frost formed on the metal of Ecstase from the icy power of Wood's attack, she remained unhurt. So too did Mine, who was standing behind her. Sheil's job has always been to protect me, Mine whispered, visibly relieved. She looked at Wood, who had appeared beside them seconds too late. Wood wasn't there to attack. He had rushed over to protect them. She puffed her cheeks, her tsundere nature kicking in. Humphrey, as long as Sheil's protecting me, there's no way I could be in danger. She crossed her arms defiantly, pretending not to care. Everyone knew, though, that the girl was pleased. Wood nodded, acknowledging her words with a smile. Of course. Sheil is an excellent bodyguard and a true friend. But since my first objective wasn't achieved, it looks like achieving my second objective is the next best thing. Mine blinked, confused. Second objective? In response, Sheil slumped to the ground, knocked unconscious by Wood's swift hand chop. He then turned to approach Mine, who quickly backed away. Isn't it obvious? We're still in the middle of a sparring session. As your opponent, knocking you out is my objective. Seeing Wood coming at her, Mine immediately raised her hands in surrender. Wait. I forfeit. I'm officially out. I don't want you to knock me out. I'd rather not be sleeping for the rest of the day. Her quick surrender brought a grin to Wood's face. He respected her decision and flashed away back to the battlefield where Bullet, Akam, Leon, and Tatsumi still stood. "Alright then," Wood announced. "Shiel and mine are out of the fight. Now it's just the four of you." His eyes settled on Akam. "Akam, you can use Morass aim to your full ability. Unless you pierce my eyes or another vital point, your curse won't affect me through my Frost Knight armor or my other defensive measures." Akam hesitated. Morass aim's ability was deadly, and she never used it in sparring, fearing what might happen even accidentally. She couldn't trust that the Frost Knight armor would hold against its power. Seeing her concern, Wood took a deep breath and demonstrated. Holding his long sword, he slashed at his free arm. Before the weapon could make contact, Wood's skin shifted into the color and sheen of dark metal. Armament hockey. The blade scraped against his arm, sending sparks flying as if it had struck iron. Seeing this, everyone gaped in shock. Leon blurted out. "This was what you used when you punched me earlier, wasn't it? No wonder it felt like I punched a metal wall." Wood gave her a serious look, ignoring the unintentional double entendre. "Exactly. This ability lets me make my body as hard as steel. Akam, unless you hit a major weak point, Morass aim won't have an effect on me. A swordsman who does not draw their blade cannot fight earnestly. It's disrespectful to your weapon and your opponent." Hearing Wood's words, and seeing his demonstration, Akam finally relented. She slowly unsheathed her imperial weapon, Morass aim. Now, every combatant in the field except Tatsumi had drawn their imperial weapons. Tatsumi, observing all this, couldn't help feeling envious. He looked at everyone, each wielding such incredible power, and couldn't help but admire them. Especially Bullet and Wood. They weren't just strong, they also looked unbelievably cool. He had seen Bullet's Incursio many times now, but seeing Wood's Frost Knight transformation for the first time left a deep impression on him. It wasn't just powerful, it was heroic. He couldn't help but be captivated by the transformation sequence, the armor, and the presence it brought. Wood and Bullet's imperial arms were undeniably awesome, and Tatsumi found himself even more determined to get his own and become someone worthy to stand alongside them. Tatsumi, everyone on the training ground had drawn their imperial arms and was prepared for the next clash. The intensity of the battle had risen to a new level. Tatsumi, who was the only one without an imperial weapon, could only look around with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. All the others were decked out in their unique imperial gear, the legendary tools said to hold immense power and the potential to decide the fate of the nation. He couldn't help but feel outclassed, but at the same time, there was a spark of hope deep inside him. A desire that one day he would also be able to wield such power and stand beside his comrades as an equal. Chapter 411, The Invincible Wood. So this is the Tigu that Wood possesses? Other than enhancing his physical capabilities like Bullet's, does it have any other abilities? Seeing the blue-armored figure covered in a layer of frost just from standing there, Tatsumi couldn't help but ask his fellow comrades beside him. Tatsumi hadn't been with Nitrade for long, and seeing Wood in his flowing blue armor with a crystal-clear blue sword, he couldn't gather much more information beyond thinking it looked incredibly cool. So, he turned to the senior members for answers. "Don't look at us. Since I joined Nitrade, this is also my first time seeing Wood use his Tigu. To be honest, I even forgot that he's a Tigu user most of the time. When we go on missions, he never needs to use his Tigu. He always completes everything smoothly using his own strength." Hearing Tatsumi's question, Leon shrugged and admitted she knew nothing either. Despite knowing Wood longer, she was in the same boat as Tatsumi. "Akam joined Nitrade earlier than us. Maybe she knows something about Wood's Tigu?" Bullet looked over at Akam, hoping she would have more information. "This is also my first time seeing Wood use his Tigu. However, I have heard Boss mention it before. Frost Knight. Winter Knight is like Bullet's Incursio, both are crafted from materials taken from a super dangerous dragon-type beast. Wood's Tigu, created from the bones of the ice dragon Skaza, which resides atop snow-covered peaks, also incorporates Millennium Cold Steel from the same mountain range. Besides enhancing the user's physical abilities, Winter Knight grants its wielder the power to manipulate ice and withstand extreme cold. So, it's also a body-enhancing Tigu, just like Bullet's. Yeah, and it has some ridiculous abilities." Akam explained what she knew. "Are we done with the tactical meeting? Then I'm going to stop holding back now." While Akam and others analyzed his abilities, Wood waited without making any moves. After all, this was a sparring session, not an actual fight to the death. As soon as the others wrapped up their discussion, Wood sprang into action. The moment he finished speaking, Wood's body, which had been standing still, left only an afterimage, and his body, moving faster than sound, appeared right in front of Tatsumi. So fast. I can't even see his movements. Seeing Wood move in an instant and suddenly appear before Tatsumi, Leon couldn't help but exclaim in awe. Their original plan was for Leon and Bullet to hold the front line, using their strength to engage Wood in direct combat while Akam sought an opening for a decisive blow. Tatsumi was supposed to adapt to the situation and provide support as needed. Unfortunately, despite the rapid growth of Tatsumi's abilities, there was still a clear gap between him and his comrades, especially since he lacked a Tigu. As a result, he ended up more as a spectator than anything. Leon and Bullet were chosen to take on the main battle role for two reasons. Bullet had the highest physical capability among the group, while Leon, wielding her Tigu Lionel, had impressive regeneration and endurance, making her ideal for prolonged fights. What neither Leon nor Bullet anticipated, however, was that once Wood donned his Tigu, his speed would increase so drastically. Rather than facing off with the strongest combatants, he chose to target the weakest link first. Tatsumi. In the eyes of Leon and Bullet, Tatsumi was undoubtedly the weakest. But in Wood's assessment, Tatsumi was also the most dangerous, so removing him from the equation first was a no-brainer. Since they were comrades, Wood did not slash Tatsumi with his sword, instead opting for a clean, powerful punch. Clang. However, just as Wood's punch was about to strike Tatsumi's abdomen, Akam dashed forward, appearing just in time to intercept it with her blade, Muramasa. Wood's gauntleted fist struck Muramasa, resulting in a loud metallic clang that sent shockwaves throughout the area. Even with both hands on her sword, Akam felt an overwhelming force pass through her arms and into her entire body. While Akam appeared slender, everyone in Nitrade knew that she was a pure brute. All the food she ate never seemed to turn into fat. It seemed to only add to her incredible strength. Even so, under the impact of Wood's punch, Akam found herself flying backward, her blade pushing back, colliding directly with Tatsumi, who was right behind her. Both of them were sent hurtling backward like cannonballs, crashing through the wall behind them. Akam came off okay, sustaining only minor internal injuries from the impact. But Tatsumi, who cushioned her landing, had it far worse. He was certain a few of his ribs had been broken again. Lubbock was absolutely right. Tatsumi was starting to realize that after this sparring session, he'd be lying in bed for a few more days to recover. Seeing Akam and Tatsumi both being flung aside, Leon and Bullet launched a pincer attack from behind. Yet, just as they got within a few meters of Wood, an icy aura suddenly burst forth from him. The temperature dropped dramatically, and the water vapor in the air condensed into frost before coalescing in one place. Boom. Ding. A massive ice wall several meters high and half a meter thick abruptly shot up behind Wood, blocking Leon's punches and Bullet's spear thrust. The wall wasn't all that thick, and under Leon's relentless barrage of strikes, it soon collapsed. However, that brief moment was all the time Wood needed to regain his stance and launch a counterattack. As the ice wall crumbled, there was an explosive sonic boom, and Wood's figure appeared before Leon once more, launching a powerful punch at her. Seeing Wood willingly come within her range, Leon didn't try to dodge. Instead, with fighting spirit blazing, she threw a punch of her own. Fists collided midair, causing a powerful shockwave that cracked the ground beneath them. Crack. The result of this fist-on-fist clash wasn't evenly matched. The sound of Leon's arm fracturing echoed loudly. As pain shot up her arm, Leon finally understood why Akam and Tatsumi had been knocked away so easily by Wood. In his armored state, his strength was on an entirely different level. Despite the pain, Leon refused to give up. She twisted her body in midair and launched a powerful spinning kick with all her strength. Her large, well-built leg sliced through the air, producing an audible whistle. Anyone unfortunate enough to be struck by that kick would surely be sent flying several hundred meters. Boom. However, facing Leon's powerful kick, Wood merely extended his arm, effortlessly blocking it before grabbing her by the ankle. Though it seemed effortless, the impact caused a shockwave. Wood was pushed back slightly, retreating 2 or 3 steps. Yes, only 2 or 3 steps. That was all. Wood, are you even human? Leon couldn't hide her frustration at seeing her full-force kick so casually stopped by Wood. She didn't have time to say more, as Wood flung her away without any hesitation. In fact, Wood had initially intended to slam her directly to the ground, but considering this was merely a sparring match and the fact that Leon had often been kind to him, he decided to go easy and just threw her aside. In the very instant Wood tossed Leon away, his observation hockey, warned him of incoming danger. The air split with a swooshing sound as something moved towards him. Wood raised his sword to block, and the clash of metal rang out. The force of the attack pushed him back 2 or 3 steps. But as he looked around, there was no one in sight. However, he had clearly sensed the attack. The observation hockey didn't lie. I see. This must be the secondary ability of your Igu, Incursio. A perfect invisibility that hides even your presence. It's quite the formidable power. But you can't hide everything. When you attack me, the airflow shifts, your killing intent leaks, and my sense of threat becomes apparent. These things can't be completely concealed. Tatsumi, severely injured and forced out of the fight, watched from the sidelines alongside Lubbock, Leon, and Akam. The latter two had both been sent flying and now sat out, humbled by the realization of Wood's restraint in not hitting them harder. Tatsumi, stubborn as ever, refused to seek immediate medical attention, wanting instead to watch the duel to its conclusion. Bullet, in Tatsumi's eyes, was a true warrior, and Wood was Night Raid's undisputed strongest. He didn't want to miss out on witnessing this showdown. Bullet had activated Incursio and used its perfect invisibility to blend into the battlefield. With his Tegu's capabilities, Bullet had completely hidden his presence. Even his figure was nowhere to be seen. Everyone in Night Raid knew that Bullet had an honest and straightforward personality. Although Incursio had the ability to turn its user invisible, Bullet rarely used this ability during combat. It was mainly reserved for stealth operations. The reason was simple: Bullet disdained the act of ambushes or surprise attacks. He preferred to overpower his opponents with strength and skill, winning through open and fair confrontation. Yet now, Bullet had broken his usual rule, using the invisibility ability against Wood. It wasn't that Bullet had compromised his principles. It was simply that Wood was too strong. Bullet knew that he stood no chance of defeating Wood in a direct confrontation. Nevertheless, his curiosity about Wood's full capabilities drove him to try this approach, aiming to draw out more of Wood's potential. Are Wood's words true? I can't seem to perceive any of those cues. Hearing Wood's explanation, Tatsumi could hardly believe it. The air currents, the threat perception, and the other things Wood had mentioned all seemed to advance to Tatsumi. That's why you're the weakest one. Look at everyone else. They're all participating in the spar, and yet you're the only one getting severely injured. Mine never missed a chance to taunt Tatsumi, especially since he was the easiest target. Mine, don't be so harsh on Tatsumi. Honestly, how many people can manage all of those things Wood described? If it were me, I might be able to sense some of the danger when being attacked. Mine, as a sniper, you can probably feel the shifts in airflow, right? As for Akam, she's probably closest to Wood in this regard and can perceive all of it, right? Leon, in an uncharacteristic move, spoke up for Tatsumi. She then glanced over at Akam. No, while I can perceive those things, if my opponent were Bullet, I don't think I could. Evidently, even if you manage to hone those abilities, the opponent still matters. Bullet was simply too powerful for Akam to track while he was invisible. On the other hand, if it had been Tatsumi using Incursio, she felt she could have easily tracked him. While Akam and the others were chatting on the sidelines, the battle on the field continued. The sounds of clashing weapons reverberated through the air, and the occasional spark flared up, flying out from different corners of the battlefield. Though Wood appeared alone in the arena, everyone knew his real opponent was a hidden, powerful figure. This is insane. Even though we can't see anything, Wood is perfectly defending against Bullet's attacks and even fighting on equal terms. The battle seemed like a one-man show starring Wood, but Night Raid knew how dangerous the situation really was. If it were anyone else besides Wood, they would have been defeated by now. Chapter 412, Tatsumi, it seems I've carried all the burdens. If this continues, it could be pretty unfavorable for Wood. Akam, who had been quietly observing the battle, suddenly spoke up. Her words drew a puzzled response from Tatsumi, who couldn't help but ask. Why? Wood seems to be defending against all of Bullet's attacks just fine. Tatsumi was genuinely confused. From his perspective, the fight looked evenly matched, and Wood's performance had been stellar thus far. Why, then, did Akam suggest that the situation wasn't in Wood's favor? There's no denying that Wood is very strong. Akam explained. And even though he seems to be holding his own against the invisible Bullet, you need to take a closer look. Tatsumi, if you watch carefully, you'll notice that Wood's offensive drive has weakened compared to how aggressively he attacked at the start. Since Bullet became invisible, Wood hasn't launched any proactive attacks. It's evident that Bullet's invisibility has robbed Wood of his target. Even if Wood is stronger, he's forced into a defensive position now. He can only react to Bullet's attacks, and it's hard for him to take the initiative since he can't locate Bullet. Attacking recklessly would only expose openings for Bullet to exploit. It wasn't Akam who answered Tatsumi this time but Leon, who was standing beside him. But even if that's the case, Wood could still remain undefeated, right? So why did Akam say that it's an unfavorable situation for him? Tatsumi's curiosity knew no bounds, and he continued to probe further. Are you an idiot? How could you compare a restful state with the kind of tension that Wood is under? Mine chimed in, her voice dripping with her usual sharp sarcasm. In his invisible state, Bullet can rest whenever he wants, strike whenever he pleases. He is conserving energy. On the other hand, Wood has to remain constantly on high alert, always bracing himself for an incoming attack. Even if they're evenly matched in terms of skill, the mental exhaustion that Wood is experiencing is very different. No matter how strong a tiger is, there will always be a moment when it dozes off. That's why Akam said Wood's situation is unfavorable. Due to her Tegu. Roman artillery, pumpkin. Mine was intimately familiar with the toll of maintaining a high state of vigilance. Without strong mental fortitude, anyone facing such pressure would soon break, making mistakes or losing composure. Hearing Mine's explanation, Tatsumi instantly understood. It was similar to his first assassination mission, the time when he faced the demon Oka. What you all said isn't wrong. Lubbock suddenly added. But there's one point I disagree with, saying the situation is unfavorable for Wood. Watch closely. For him, these kinds of difficulties aren't a big deal. Wood is a born warrior, a pure combat maniac. Believe me, he'll find a way to turn the tables soon. I think Bullet's about to lose. Unlike the rest of Nitrade, who all seemed to believe that Wood was at a disadvantage, Lubbock knew better. He had seen it many times. If Wood found himself in trouble, it never lasted long. Lubbock was confident that the tide would soon change, and Wood would take over the fight. The stronger the challenge, the more focused Wood became. Typically, when fighting Wood, it looked like a one-sided beatdown, but the fight could drag on since Wood loved to toy with his opponents. But if things ever appeared to be against Wood's favor, that was when you knew the battle was about to end. Because that was the moment when Wood was actually starting to get serious. Lubbock knew this from personal experience. Many times, as a child, he tried to catch up to Wood, thinking he was finally getting close, only to find, much to his frustration, that the gap between them was insurmountable. Wood always pretended to be struggling for longer than necessary, then quickly ended it when he felt satisfied. It was as if to validate Lubbock's words. A drastic shift in the battle occurred shortly after. The surrounding temperature plummeted. Wood, standing there in his armor, seemed to draw all the cold into himself. Frost formed at his feet and rapidly spread across the entire training ground. It was noon, but Nitrade felt a biting chill creep over their bodies as if they'd suddenly been plunged into winter. The floor beneath them soon froze into a thick layer of ice, and snowflakes began to fall from the sky. It's a pity that this world lacks magical elements. Wood muttered. Just relying on my Tegu limits what I can do. Still, for now, this level will do just fine. Bullet, I see you now. It's time to end this. With those words, Wood exploded into action, his feet shattering the ice beneath him as he lunged forward at supersonic speed. To Bullet's shock, Wood wasn't bluffing. His trajectory was aimed directly at him. 100 Ghost Sword style, single slash. Snow Maiden. In this icy environment, Wood's attack drew power from his Tegu, and though it lacked the magic it could have been bolstered with, it reached half the potency of a true magic sword strike. The ground split as a massive blue crescent sword wave slashed out, carrying the cold winds with it. Bullet tried to fend it off with his spear. Red-backed shrike. But the force bent his weapon. Ultimately, he was flung back like a cannonball, smashing into one of the Nitrade hideout's buildings, and upon impact, his hidden form was revealed. The battle had ended too quickly, leaving Tatsumi and the others stunned. Only Lubbock wore a knowing smirk, as if to say, I knew it. Bullet, who had released his Tegu, stood up mostly unscathed. Accepting his defeat graciously, he laughed heartily and extended a hand to shake Wood's. I guess even when I violate my principles and resort to such underhanded means, I still can't beat you. Bullet admitted his loss readily. Even after using tactics he usually avoided, including his Tegu's invisibility, he found himself unable to best Wood. Bullet, what exactly happened just now? How did Wood manage to find you at the end? Tatsumi asked. His question echoed the curiosity of everyone else. The battle had changed so quickly that they hadn't even had time to discern what had happened. I think it was the breath I exhaled. Bullet replied, pointing at Tatsumi. Like what you're doing right now. Haven't you noticed anything? With Bullet's prompt, Tatsumi and the rest quickly realized. Humans breathe, and because of body heat, in frigid temperatures, their breath creates visible mist. Incursio allows for perfect invisibility and complete concealment of one's presence, but it cannot hide one's breath. Wood had created an icy environment with his Tegu, not just for show or to enhance his sword skills but also to force Bullet to reveal himself. But can't the mist from one's breath be controlled if you're careful? Leon speculated. If Bullet had noticed quickly enough, maybe he could have continued fighting? Leon tried controlling her own breathing, realizing that if she took shallower breaths, her mist wasn't as apparent. Perhaps Wood wouldn't have noticed her. It still wouldn't have mattered. The snow falling from the sky and the ice beneath our feet are my eyes as well. Wood caught a snowflake in his hand and stomped the ice below him, his meaning immediately clear to everyone. Besides the visible mist of Bullet's breath, snowflakes landing on his body would have given away his position. After all, Bullet wasn't truly disappearing. Additionally, any movement would leave footprints in the accumulating snow. Previously, Night Raid knew Wood was strong, but now they had a far more concrete understanding of how formidable he truly was. So even Wood, who's this powerful, still isn't a match for that Asdeath? Tatsumi's question echoed what everyone else was wondering. They had heard from Najunda that Wood was the only person to have faced Asdeath and survived with his body intact. They also heard from Lubbock and Akam that after that battle, Wood had collapsed from exhaustion and was unconscious for an entire day. Before today, it was all just stories. But now, after seeing Wood's abilities, they found it hard to imagine that someone could actually pose a threat to him. Asdeath really was that monstrously strong? Asdeath is incredibly powerful. Her Tigu is far superior to those of other users, and her personal strength surpasses ordinary humans. She's an all-around warrior with no apparent weaknesses. When we fought, I still had some abilities I hadn't used yet, but I could sense that she, too, was holding back. Wood's words left the Night Raid members in a somber mood. Given what Wood said, it was no wonder Najunda had cautioned them against acting recklessly. If they encountered Asdeath alone, they were likely doomed. Later that evening, when Najunda returned to the hideout from the Revolutionary Army headquarters, her cigarette almost fell from her mouth upon seeing the state of the place. Broken walls and debris everywhere. Feeling the cold still lingering in the air, Najunda's mind immediately went to Asdeath's Tigu, suspecting that their hideout had been compromised and Asdeath had attacked. With an uneasy heart, Najunda dismounted from her flying danger beast, hurrying into the hideout. Yet, what she saw was Wood and the others lounging in the living room, each occupied with their own thing, chatting and laughing without a care. Can someone tell me what happened here while I was away? Najunda lit another cigarette, watching her comrades as she spoke. It's all Leon's fault. She kept thinking about challenging Asdeath after hearing how strong she was. To help her understand the gap between her and Asdeath, I had to spar with her myself. After hearing about the spar, Bullet, Akam, and the others insisted on joining in. And, well, that's how the place ended up like this. Wood's explanation was casual, and as he spoke, Leon and the others went slack-jawed. Wasn't this supposed to be a joint responsibility, and now he was dumping all the blame on them? When did he become so good at shifting blame? It's all Tatsumi's fault. He kept asking about Wood's Tigu, so I wanted to test it out. Tatsumi was always asking who the strongest member of Night Raid was. Yeah, it's all because of the newbie. Najunda's face grew darker as everyone kept pointing fingers, blaming Tatsumi. In the meantime, the boy in question lay in bed, nursing his wounds, happy to have such dependable comrades. Little did he know that his supposedly trustworthy teammates had already stabbed him in the back numerous times. Poor Tatsumi. Only a few days after recovering, Najunda ordered him to fix up the damage to the hideout, though he couldn't figure out how he had offended the boss. He did notice that his comrades seemed much friendlier than before. Even mine, who used to constantly berate him, had toned down her teasing recently. I went to the Revolutionary Army headquarters to gather more information on Asdeath. Najunda began. According to reliable sources, the northern tribes have mostly been subdued, and the minister has been urging her to return to the capital. So, Asdeath has sent her elite subordinates, the three beasts, ahead of her. Apparently, Asdeath only heard brief mentions of an assassination group in the capital and seems to be underestimating us. But this gives us an opportunity. The three beasts have served under Asdeath for years and are just as ruthless. They are powerful Tigu users. If we can take them out before Asdeath returns, it'll be akin to cutting off one of her arms. It'll make dealing with her later that much easier. Chapter 413, Are There Two Woods? Asdeath's subordinates. The three beasts were known to Wood and Najunda from their time in the military. To put it simply, having spent so much time under Asdeath, those three had become twisted individuals. Vicious and certainly not good people. In order to welcome the three beasts, those nobles in the minister's faction are even hosting a banquet specifically for them. Many of the Empire's parasites will attend that party, which presents a perfect opportunity for us. Najunda explained. Due to Night Raid's recent activities, the minister's faction nobles were constantly living in fear. Now, with Asdeath's trusted subordinates, the three beasts, returning to the capital, they naturally jumped at the chance to hold on to them for protection. Though the three beasts were merely Asdeath's lackeys, and their status was far inferior to the nobles present, at the end of the day, power ruled supreme. Asdeath had spread terror to the surrounding territories, and even if the three beasts weren't as famous, they still commanded a certain level of infamy. To the nobles of the Empire, Night Raid was just a ragtag group of assassins and couldn't possibly compare to the three beasts, who had been on countless battlefields. Since this assassination involved multiple targets, Najunda decided to mobilize all of Night Raid, assigning specific tasks to each member. Bullet and Tatsumi were responsible for infiltrating the banquet venue, identifying assassination targets among the nobles, and reporting their locations. Mine and Shield would work together to execute long-range assassinations based on Tatsumi's reports. Leon and Atom were assigned to create a distraction elsewhere in the capital to prevent the Empire from sending reinforcements to surround the noble ship, ensuring that Bullet and Tatsumi could successfully retreat. Wood and Lubbock were assigned to provide support and handle anything unexpected. Lubbock would use Crossdale to set up barriers around the venue, preventing the targets from escaping, while Wood was to stay mobile and adapt to the situation as needed. The banquet held by the nobles to welcome the three beasts took place aboard a luxury ship docked at the pier. Tatsumi had infiltrated the venue disguised as a waiter since he wasn't on the Empire's wanted list, while Bullet used his Incursio to stay invisible and hide on the ship. Tatsumi took in the bustling banquet scene, watching the nobles fawn over the three beasts. He patted his cheeks, reminding himself to stay calm. The boss mentioned it. These targets aren't like the ones before. The three beasts are Tegu users, and each one of them is stronger than that serial killer, Zank. I need to stay focused. Leon had also advised him to keep his presence low, forget who he was, and blend in naturally so that others would overlook him. Just as Tatsumi was about to carry a tray of wine toward a group of nobles, aiming to take out some of them discreetly, he caught sight of a familiar figure in the corner of his eye and was immediately stunned. So stunned, in fact, that he doubted his eyes and moved closer to confirm. You there, waiter. Just in time. Bring that wine over to us. We're out over here. A young noblewoman called out, reaching for the wine without waiting for Tatsumi to respond. She then eagerly poured a drink for a young man beside her. Pouring drinks was a waiter's job, but this noblewoman didn't seem to care. And it wasn't just her. Several other noblewomen nearby were doing the same, competing for the attention of this young man. This scene was rare, but it wasn't what truly shocked Tatsumi. What left him stunned was that the young man receiving all this attention looked exactly like Wood, a member of their own assassination organization. Mr. Wood, your stories are simply fascinating. Would you tell us more? Mr. Wood, this is my address. You're always welcome to visit my home, and I promise you'll be well taken care of. Mr. Wood, we have many interesting things at my estate. Seeing the scene before him, Tatsumi could hardly believe his eyes. To his knowledge, Wood was a wanted man in the Empire, yet here he was, openly mingling in such a high-profile venue. Even more perplexing was how none of his conspicuous behavior seemed to raise any suspicion. Unable to comprehend the situation, Tatsumi initially thought it might just be someone who looked like Wood. So, he stayed on the sidelines to gather more information. According to this look-alike, his name was also Wood, and he was an adventurer. He had traveled to uncharted mountain peaks, ventured to the ends of the world, fought dragons for his family, and matched wits with witches for his friends. The story was captivating, one twist following another. Initially, Tatsumi thought it was all just a fabrication, but the way the man described the scenes and the events, they seemed so vivid and real. It almost made him believe every word. This Wood was noble, always risking his life for his family and friends, and yet, he had no true love interest. The young noblewoman, being in their prime and highly emotional, were all entranced by the adventurer's charisma. His charm, his sense of humor, and his genteel demeanor, all combined with his striking looks, made him an irresistible figure. This Wood claimed that he merely shared a name with a wanted criminal of the Empire, and the noblewoman believed him. He added that it was just bad luck that he happened to look similar to the wanted man, and they believed that too. Some of the noblewomen, now completely smitten, even offered to use their influence to have the bounty on his head rescinded. Don't underestimate these women. Those who could attend this banquet were daughters of powerful noble families, and their collective influence was not to be taken lightly. However, Wood gently declined their help, explaining that as an adventurer, the Empire was merely a stop along his journey. His life belonged to the stars and the wide horizons beyond. His poetic response left the young noblewoman dazzled. One of them even suggested giving up her noble status to accompany him on his travels. After eavesdropping for a while, Tatsumi concluded that this lookalike was just a very talented storyteller with no other significance. He certainly wasn't the Wood he knew, who was carefree, often got drunk with Leon, and peeked at women with Lubbock. This refined, piano-playing, courteous version of Wood couldn't possibly be the same person. Everything, from his elegant demeanor to the way he respectfully kept his distance from the infatuated noblewoman, seemed like a completely different person. Amazing how the world works. I wonder what Wood would think if he found out there's someone who looks just like him. Too bad I'm on a mission now, otherwise, I'd want to chat with him. His adventure stories are quite entertaining, and he seems like a decent guy. Realizing he had a mission to complete, Tatsumi glanced at the fake Wood one last time before moving on to locate his actual target. But as Tatsumi left, the real Wood, still surrounded by the young noblewoman, stopped playing the piano. Smiling warmly, he addressed them. Ladies, I may have to excuse myself for a little while. Mr. Wood, this is my address. I'll be waiting for you at home tonight. Mr. Wood, I have a villa in the capital. I truly admire your piano skills and hope you will come by to play for me again. Mr. Wood, this is my address. My husband is out of town for a month, and the plumbing at home seems a bit off. It would be wonderful if you could come by to fix it. Wood, hearing some of the more suggestive comments, kept his composure. Madam, you put me in a tough spot. But, out of my spirit of service, I'll see if I can find time to pay a visit. Elsewhere, Tatsumi followed one of his assassination targets into the bathroom, slicing his throat cleanly before he could react. Just as Tatsumi finished, another target unexpectedly entered and caught sight of Tatsumi standing over the dead body. The new arrival quickly pieced together the scene and was about to yell for help. Before he could make a sound, a crisp snap echoed through the air, and the man crumpled to the floor, his neck broken. Tatsumi, you are too careless. If that guy had managed to shout, our mission would have gotten much more complicated. A voice called out from the doorway. Still in his offensive stance, Tatsumi looked toward the door, startled, as the figure stepped out of the shadows. Slowly, Tatsumi's mouth opened in shock. Wood. That guy who was just playing the piano and telling stories. That was really you? Wood, dressed in a dapper suit and elegantly wiping his hands with a handkerchief, gave Tatsumi a wry smile. Who else could it be? Did you honestly think there was someone else out there with my exact looks and the same name? But that guy played the piano. He knew noble etiquette. He was so refined. While you usually drink yourself stupid, act like a pervert, and are so laid back. Tatsumi wanted to point out just how vastly different this version of Wood was from the one he knew. But he held back, aware of their camaraderie and, more importantly, Wood's strength. He didn't want to risk a beating, so he quickly changed his tone. Has no one ever told you that before joining Night Raid, I was the eldest son of a merchant family? I mastered piano, etiquette, and socializing at a young age. Besides, having an extra identity is always useful in this line of work. It keeps you alive longer. Though Tatsumi didn't always understand Wood's reasoning, he couldn't deny his admiration for him. In every aspect. Combat skills, intelligence, assassin's instincts. Wood seemed flawless. Even Tatsumi, who knew Wood personally, hadn't connected this version of Wood to the one he knew. So, how could the nobles, who had never met him before, make the connection? With Wood's assistance, the assassination progressed smoothly. However, as the number of missing people aboard the ship increased, it became evident that something was amiss. By the time the three beasts members Nio and Daidara noticed Tatsumi lurking around, they didn't hesitate to launch their attack. Just as Tatsumi turned, signaling to Wood that they'd need to split their opponents between them, he realized, to his dismay, that Wood had already vanished without a trace. The reason Wood left was simple. Mine had gotten word to him that Bullet was in trouble up on the ship's deck, and the situation was dire. Normally, Mine would have been able to provide support from a distance, but she and Shiel were also having issues of their own. It seemed that Takom and Leon hadn't managed to intercept all of the Empire's reinforcements, as they'd encountered a woman from the Imperial Guard with some peculiar mental issues. She was also a Tegu user, which had forced Mine and Shiel into a tough spot as well. Chapter 414, Play along in this act. As indicated by Mine's tone, Bullet's situation seemed far more dangerous, so Wood could only proceed to assist him first. As for Tatsumi, facing two opponents alone was indeed perilous, but Wood had unwavering faith in the chosen child of fate. He was certain Tatsumi wouldn't die in such a situation. Not that the child of fate couldn't perish, but in a heated shonen manga, the protagonist only dies during a final showdown with the big villain. A near-ironclad rule. Clearly, this storyline was nowhere close to the finale. The Revolutionary Army hadn't yet toppled the Empire, and Daidas and Nio of the three beasts were nowhere near the level of final bosses. At most, they were elite underlings. Arriving on the dragon ship's deck, Wood immediately understood the predicament Bullet had gotten into. Bullet's opponent was General Liver, the strongest of the three beasts and Bullet's former superior. As former comrades, both were intimately familiar with each other, which allowed Liver to detect Bullet's infiltration and force a confrontation on the ship's deck. A terrain advantageous to him. Liver was a former Imperial general known for his bravery and intelligence. He was falsely accused and imprisoned for refusing to pay bribes, only to be rescued by Esdeath. Since then, he had devoted himself to serving her. His Tegu was called Black Marlin, Drinker of Blood, which was made from the water-dwelling dangerous beast's fluid-controlling organs. With this Tegu, the user could manipulate any liquid they touched, including blood. Considering that they were currently on a ship surrounded by water, Liver's Tegu, Drinker of Blood, allowed him a substantial advantage. Yet Liver did not anticipate how much Bullet had grown in strength. Despite his overwhelming advantage, Bullet managed to hold his ground, even putting pressure on Liver at times. Desperate, Liver resorted to his Tegu's secret skill, the Blood Blade Kill. Using his own blood as a weapon. Even Bullet's Incursio could not fully withstand it, leading him to sustain injuries. What Bullet hadn't expected, however, was that Liver had spiked his own blood with lethal poison. Bullet, injured by the Blood Blade Kill, had also been poisoned. When Wood reached the deck, both Liver and Bullet had ceased fighting and instead seemed to chat like an old commander and his subordinate. According to Liver, the poison in their veins was incurable, leaving both with no chance of survival. Since fighting would lead to death either way, they decided to save their strength in hopes that a comrade might arrive so they could share their final thoughts. Liver, old and already weakened, died first. Seeing his former superior die right before his eyes, Bullet couldn't help but feel sentimental. You two were a victim of the Empire's darkness. In that case, why did you choose to stand so firmly on the Empire's side? Was it loyalty to the Empire, or was it because of General Esdeath, who saved your life? Bullet asked, gazing at the lifeless body of Liver. Sadly, his fallen superior was in no condition to respond. It looks like it's my turn next, huh? Too bad I won't get the chance to meet that general. The one you dedicated your life to serving. And that I won't see Tatsumi's growth, or witness my comrades shattering the Empire's darkness. What a pity. Though he was poisoned and facing death, Bullet showed no fear, only regret for not being able to see the Empire's future. Yo, mine said your situation was dangerous, but looking at it now, it seems like you won, right? When Wood arrived on deck, he saw the lifeless Liver and a weakened but living Bullet. He couldn't help but tease him. I didn't expect to have this much luck. Seeing a comrade one last time before I die. Wood, I've been poisoned by General Liver. Before I die, there's something I'd like to ask you. Seeing Wood approach, Bullet forced a weak smile. He had thought he wouldn't have the chance to leave any last words, but it seemed fate had other plans for him. You said you're poisoned? Let me take a look. Don't waste your time. Liver said the poison is incurable, he himself died from it. I just want you to pass my Tegu, Incursio, to Tatsumi and share a few things with him. Bullet removed the dagger with the attached chain from his waist and handed it to Wood. Wood, however, didn't take the dagger, instead carefully examining Bullet's body. He said casually. If there's something you want to say to Tatsumi, you should say it yourself. You know how much that kid looks up to you. If I relay your words, it won't have the same impact. Hearing Wood's response, Bullet, though nearing death, couldn't help but feel exasperated. Of course, if he could, he'd talk to Tatsumi personally, guide him, and entrust him with Incursio. But the problem was that he was about to die. He was poisoned, with perhaps only a few minutes left. There was no time for him to meet Tatsumi in person. But Wood, I'm poisoned and about to die. Stop talking nonsense. I have a way to save you. However, even if I pull you back from the brink of death, you'll probably never be able to use Incursio again. That Tegu places too much strain on your body. If you use it again after I save you, you'll definitely die. Before Bullet could express his shock, he felt himself enveloped in a soft, green glow. I know you're shocked, but don't say anything. I need to focus right now. Bullet swallowed the words he was about to say and quietly focused on the changes within his body. Surrounded by a warm, green light, Bullet could feel his vitality slowly returning. The toxins in his blood were gradually being purged. Behind him, Wood stood with runic symbols glowing on his chest. The Heart of God. His forehead was beaded with sweat. As mentioned before, the mana in this world was extremely scarce. Nearly negligible. Making magic difficult. But Wood had a habit of inscribing healing runes on his body and storing mana. Scarce mana didn't mean non-existent mana. With time, even a small amount of mana could accumulate, and with the boost from the Heart of God, Wood could manage to cast an advanced spell. In other worlds, Wood would casually cast holy level or king level spells. Compared to those, an advanced spell was nearly useless in battle, and using the Heart of God to do it seemed a waste. So he seldom used it. However, while advanced battle magic was useless to him, an advanced healing spell was incredibly effective in a world with medieval-level medical capabilities. If it were a holy level or king-level healing spell, Wood could fully revive Bullet with no side effects. But now, using the advanced holy magic spell Purify, all he could do was rid Bullet of the poison. As for the irreversible damage caused by the poison, Wood could not heal that without higher-level magic. He had done all he could to save Bullet's life. Still, Bullet was stunned. As a former subordinate of Liver, Bullet knew his old commander would not bother lying about something like the poison. Not when it killed him. A supposedly incurable poison. Yet Wood had removed it. Wood, Didn't you say I could survive, but I'd be too weak to use Incursio again? If so, I still want Tatsumi to have Incursio. He has a strong affinity for it, and I truly believe that he can fully wield its power. Bullet had been watching Tatsumi closely since his recruitment, impressed by his potential, determination, and character. Wood had once said that Tatsumi would grow strong, and at that time, Bullet was skeptical. But now, among the night raid, no one believed in Tatsumi's potential more than Bullet. Your body indeed can't handle Incursio anymore, but as long as you avoid high-intensity battles, it shouldn't be a problem. If you want Tatsumi to have Incursio, that's your choice. You don't need my permission. In Wood's eyes, Bullet wasn't dead or incapable of fighting. Though he could no longer use Incursio, he could always use another Tigu with less severe side effects. Even without a Tigu, Bullet's personal skills were outstanding, and he need not speak as if giving a final farewell. No, to inspire Tatsumi and help him grow, Wood, I want you to play along in a little act with me. On the other side of things, Tatsumi wasn't faring well. Facing two Tigu users alone, he had just managed to block Daida's axe before being punched through the ship's thick wooden wall by Nai-Ah, who had activated the secret technique Summon Demon. Had it not been for his protagonist status and a tough-as-nails fate, any normal person would have already died facing these two. But despite being battered, Tatsumi was miraculously without fatal injuries. Still, Tatsumi felt frustrated. Wasn't this supposed to be a foolproof mission? Wasn't everyone in Night Raid mobilized for this? Then why had he been fighting alone this entire time, taking on two enemies by himself? If backup didn't arrive soon, he was done for. Slamming into the deck, Tatsumi forced himself to a halt, only to spot Wood and Bullet standing there. Seeing Wood and Bullet, Tatsumi's previous apprehension instantly disappeared. Night Raid's strongest warrior, Wood, was here, along with the man Tatsumi admired most, Brother Bullet. With these two backing him up, what did he have to worry about? Seeing Tatsumi getting thrown to the deck, Daidas and Nai-Ah, who had chased after him, quickly noticed Wood, Bullet, and the fallen Liver. Though not deeply bonded, they had worked with Liver for a long time. Seeing their comrade dead, both Daidas and Nai-Ah were furious. The sight of Wood only intensified that rage, reminding them of their past encounter on the border. So, you're part of this Night Raid group here in the capital, huh, Wood? Well, this time, I'll settle all accounts. I'll definitely kill you. Back in the tribal arena on the border, Nai-Ah, one of the three beasts, had once sparred with Wood, only to be brutally defeated. Since then, Nai-Ah had trained hard, always leading charges against the tribes in hopes of one day exacting revenge on Wood. Today, Nai-Ah was stronger than he had been in the original story, and after activating Summon Demon, he was even capable of facing Asdeath for several rounds. Oh, it's you. The guy who only knows how to bully the weak. It's been a while, and it seems you've grown a bit. But don't think things will go like last time. Back then, we were comrades, so I held back. But this time, I won't. Wood's taunt immediately enraged the hot-headed Nai-Ah, who dashed toward Wood, aiming a punch straight at his face. You've definitely improved, but you're not the only one. If that's all you've got, there's no way you can settle old scores. You won't even leave here alive. Chapter 415, Heavy Casualties for Night Raid. With a massive burst of force, Nai-Ah's punch was effortlessly caught by Wood with just a single hand. Wood then grabbed Nai-Ah by the wrist, pivoted at his waist, and, with a powerful over-the-shoulder throw, slammed the much larger Nai-Ah hard onto the deck of the dragon ship. Boom! A deafening impact echoed through the air, and Nai-Ah, whose back collided with the deck, spat out a mouthful of blood. The force of the slam caused the 100-meter-long dragon ship to tilt slightly from the sheer pressure on one end, momentarily submerging a portion of the ship and sending waves splashing outwards. If this had been the old Nai-Ah, such an impact would have been enough to take him out of the fight completely. However, the current Nai-Ah was far stronger than before. Though Wood's over-the-shoulder slam had broken multiple bones, it wasn't enough to put Nai-Ah completely out of commission. He even had enough strength left to kick at Wood. Wood blocked the kick with his arm, though the force still pushed him back a few steps. I must admit, you've improved more than I expected in such a short time, Wood said. In that case, I suppose I'll get a bit more serious. Seeing Nai-Ah stubbornly pull himself out of the broken deck with determination still on his face, Wood decided to show him respect as a warrior. Slowly, he drew the long sword from his waist. Meanwhile, on the other side of the deck, Tatsumi was locked in a fierce battle with Daidas, another Tigu user. Given Tatsumi's recent growth, it still wouldn't have been enough to match someone like Daidas, one of Asdeath's three beasts. Even the weakest of the three beasts had served alongside Asdeath on numerous expeditions, their combat power incomparable to someone like Zank, the Executioner. Originally, Nai-Ah and Daidas had toyed with Tatsumi, trying to extract information about the other members of Night Raid. If they hadn't held back, Tatsumi might have died several times over, even with his protagonist's plot armor. Now, however, Tatsumi was managing to go toe-to-toe with Daida's, and there was a reason for that. He had just learned that his most admired comrade in Night Raid, the one who looked out for him the most, Bullet, had defeated his opponent, but at the cost of being fatally poisoned. In his grief, Tatsumi inherited the Tigu Incursio from Bullet, along with Bullet's dying wish. Seeing Bullet die in his arms, Tatsumi picked up the chained white short sword for the first time and activated Incursio, letting out a primal scream from his soul. It was previously mentioned that protagonists like Tatsumi tend to go berserk under certain circumstances, and seeing Bullet's death had clearly triggered that state in him. Combined with the power boost from Incursio, Tatsumi was now much stronger than when he had fought Zank. Despite it being his first time using Incursio, Tatsumi seemed to have an exceptional compatibility with the Tigu, and he quickly turned the tables, forcing Daida's into a defensive position. By the time Wood had defeated Naion finished his battle, he was surprised to see Tatsumi finish off Daida's on the other side. After learning of Bullet's death, Tatsumi had matured significantly, which was precisely what Bullet had intended all along. Bullet hadn't truly died in Tatsumi's arms. Instead, he had faked his death using a pseudo-death method known to the Imperial military, with some assistance from Wood's magic. Although Wood had removed the poison from Bullet's body, to avoid any lasting damage, Bullet needed to refrain from taking on missions for a while. Taking advantage of this false death, Bullet planned to return to the Revolutionary Army headquarters for some recuperation. Before leaving, Bullet had orchestrated this elaborate ruse to spur Tatsumi's growth. It was all done out of care and meticulous thought. The following day, the atmosphere in the Night Raid hideout could only be described as gloomy. Though their mission to assassinate the three beasts and most of the nobles had ended in success, the results were hardly smooth. For Night Raid, the operation had come at a high cost. This was the first time since Night Raid's founding that its members had suffered a major setback, including casualties. To maintain the illusion for Tatsumi and to reinforce the gravity of the situation to the others, only Wood and their leader Najunda knew the truth about Bullet's survival. For the rest of the members, hearing that Bullet had died and that they hadn't even been able to recover his body during their hurried retreat plunged them into a deep state of sorrow. And Bullet wasn't the only casualty. Mine and Shiel's group had also faced difficulties during their battle the previous night. To protect a distracted Mine, Shiel had lost an arm to a woman named Sarah from the Imperial Guard. If not for Lubbock being nearby and using the toughest bound cutter threads from his Tigu crosstail to block the majority of the attack, Shiel might have been sliced in half by Sarah's biological Tigu. With her arm severed, Shiel could no longer serve as Mine's bodyguard. She needed to return with Najunda to the Revolutionary Army headquarters in hopes of getting a mechanical arm. Although the three beasts had been eliminated, Night Raid had sustained a rare death and severe injury. For comrades who lived together and fought side by side, there was no joy to be found in such a victory. Bullet's death had a profound impact on Tatsumi, who had since immersed himself in relentless training. The figure that was always in the training grounds used to be Bullet, but it had now gradually been replaced by Tatsumi. According to Tatsumi, since he had inherited Brother Bullet's will, he needed to complete both his own training and Bullet's daily regimen. Even if he was slow, he didn't mind. If he couldn't finish during the day, he'd continue into the night. He was determined that, one day, he'd catch up to Brother Bullet. Under the moonlit sky, two figures stood on the roof of Night Raid's hideout, watching the boy swinging his sword in the training grounds. The silver-haired, stern-looking woman spoke first. "That kid, Tatsumi, hasn't taken a break since noon, has he? Training like this isn't strengthening him. It's self-destruction." Najunda watched the sweat-drenched boy in the moonlight, regretting that she had agreed to Wood and Bullet's idea in the first place. Though Tatsumi was motivated, it was clear he was on the brink of obsession. The rest of Night Raid wasn't responding as she had hoped, either. Instead of being inspired, they all seemed deeply dispirited. Mine, who had once been lively, now wouldn't even touch her favorite snacks. Ever since Shiel had lost her arm, she spent all her time practicing her marksmanship, with a picture of Sarah as her target. Isn't his good for him? Tatsumi has a stronger adaptability than anyone else. Plus, Night Raid had it too easy for far too long. A setback like this isn't necessarily a bad thing. At least we didn't actually lose anyone, right? Asdeath is far more dangerous than the likes of the three beasts. If we keep our old mindset, facing her will be the real danger," said Wood. Najunda had gathered all the members of Night Raid the next day and delivered a bombshell. "I just received intelligence from the Revolutionary Army. After learning about the deaths of her three beasts, Asdeath has swiftly subdued the rebels and will be returning to the capital within 2 days. Moreover, she's requested the minister gather other Imperial Tigu users to prepare for a direct confrontation against us. There were a total of 48 Tigu. Though some had been lost to the passage of time, the Empire certainly had more than just the ones in Night Raid's possession. With the Empire's resources, they could easily assemble a force of Tegu users that could match Night Raid. Najunda had never expected that eliminating the three beasts would provoke Esdeath's competitive spirit, prompting her to form her own Tegu user unit. An individual powerhouse was dangerous, but ultimately just one person. However, when someone both powerful and adept at rallying others began to amass an army, that was true peril. Who cares? I refuse to believe every Tegu user in the Empire is as dangerous as Esdeath. Let them come. It'll just give me the chance to avenge Bullet and Shiel, declared Leon. While some reacted with solemn expressions, Leon remained as fearless as ever, ready for battle. Bullet and Shiel's situation wasn't enough to wake you up? We're not dealing with powerless nobles anymore. We're facing elite warriors from across the Empire. The Empire has stood tall on the continent for over 1,000 years. Its resources are beyond imagination. Never underestimate them. With Bullet and Shield gone, we're clearly lacking firepower. I'll be heading back to the Revolutionary Army headquarters to request reinforcements. In my absence, Wood will be in charge. Follow his commands without question. Najunda entrusted Wood with a temporary command, knowing he had the strength and cunning necessary for the role. Though seeming laid back, when it came down to it, he could be ruthless and calculating. Qualities essential for leadership. After giving her instructions, Najunda set off for the Revolutionary Army headquarters. While Wood was capable of taking on the role, she overlooked one key factor. With the persona Wood had cultivated thus far, he was hardly in a position to control a group of troublemakers like Leon and the others. Apart from his power and seniority, Wood was only 15 years old, making him one of the youngest members of Night Raid, alongside Mine, Datsumi, and Shiel. Leon, who was older and had a bold, carefree attitude, wasn't someone easily restrained. Certainly not by Wood. Before, Bullet and Shiel had always been around to keep things balanced. But with Najunda gone, Leon naturally assumed the role of the gang's big sister. For the first 2 days after Najunda's departure, Leon had managed to stay calm. But 2 days was her limit. On the third day, she suggested going into the capital to gather intelligence. Even if a confrontation was inevitable, having information about their opponents would be advantageous. Lubbock and Shiel had always obeyed Najunda's orders to the letter, so Leon's persuasion fell on deaf ears. But Mine and Datsumi seemed tempted. Mine still bore a grudge over Shiel's injury and wanted to take a stroll through the capital to clear her mind. Datsumi, on the other hand, was eager to gather information about the Empire's Tegu users. Since neither he nor Leon had been publicly identified, he believed they could gather intel safely if they were careful. Wood's status as acting leader was little more than a formality. After Najunda left, they continued their usual voting process. With Leon, Datsumi, and Mine already in favor, Wood's objection seemed futile. If that's the case, then I'll go with Leon, Datsumi, and Mine to collect information in the capital. Lubbock and Shiel, you two will stay behind to guard the hideout. We'll stick to our usual formation. Teams of 2. I'll pair up with Mine, while Leon and Datsumi will form the other team. There was a reason behind the pairing. Leon and Datsumi both had excellent mobility, giving them a good chance of escaping any danger. Mine, on the other hand, had lowest mobility. Her physical condition was no better than that of an average girl. Therefore, she had to be with the strongest member, Wood, to ensure that if anything went wrong, he could carry her away from the battlefield. Wood, have you lost your mind? Are you really going along with their reckless plan? Lubbock was the first to oppose Wood's announcement. Najunda was his goddess, and he intended to follow her orders to the letter. He believed they should stay put and wait for her to return with reinforcements. Well, you know what they say. Know thyself and thy enemy. Besides, do you think they'd listen to me if I told them no? Instead of letting them sneak off and act recklessly, it's better to make proper preparations and keep the situation under control. Chapter 416, Esdeath's marriage requirements in the Imperial Palace. After Najunda returned to the Revolutionary Army headquarters, the strongest general of the Empire, Esdeath, had also returned to the capital and entered the palace to meet with the young emperor.